All right, welcome everyone. I call the November 17th, 2020 regular Bothell City Council meeting to order. So before we move on to the agenda items, I'd like to acknowledge our remote meeting format. Proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings is still in effect. Therefore, this meeting will be held entirely remotely. Public comment will be allowed both in writing or verbally. Sign-up sheets were provided by the City Clerk's office via link from the agenda. The video of this meeting will be streamed live as well as recorded and available for later viewing on the city's YouTube channel. A call-in number was provided on the meeting agenda for members of the public who wish to call in by phone to listen live to the meeting. If you have called in, we ask that you mute your device so as not to interfere with the meeting. If a participant fails to mute their connection and causes a disruption to the meeting, the connection will be terminated. For our phone-in callers during staff presentation, staff will make every effort to specify which materials they are referencing so everyone can follow along. So at this point, we'll take a moment to take roll call of the council members by position number. Please say here when the city clerk calls your name.
Deputy Mayor Zorns, and I know she's not there, and I know she's having trouble logging in. There she is, but she has no connection to audio. So can you just give us a thumbs up? Deputy Mayor Zorns, she's here. Councilmember Thompson, Councilmember McAuliffe, they're absent. Councilmember McNeil,
here.
Mayor Olson,
Here.
Councilmember Dorr,
Here.
Councilmember Agnew.
Here.
All present with the exception of council members McAuliffe and Thompson.
Looks like Councilmember Thompson just joined.
Oh, there he is. Thank you.
All right. So lastly, before we begin, I'd like to reiterate some meeting guidelines. Please speak clearly and pause frequently. Mute your microphone when not speaking. If you're also streaming the live video feed, please turn the sound off as there is a delay. So for our council members, if you want to speak, please indicate by holding up a yellow card in the lower portion of your screen. This will help avoid two people speaking at the same times. And please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. So the first item on our agenda tonight is meeting agenda approval. Is there any changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none. We will move down to visitor comments. So in keeping with Governor Jay Inslee's emergency proclamation 20-28 regarding open public meetings, the city has accepted visitor comment in writing as well as accepted sign-up sheets for those who wish to speak at tonight's meeting. Written comments when submitted by 3 p.m. When submitted to the city clerk no later than 3 p.m. today, were forwarded to all the city council members and are part of the record. City clerk, do we have anyone that would like to make public comment tonight?
We do, thank you. We received 3 written comments. I'll go through those first. The first one is, and I'm hoping I say these names correctly, Ta Win from Sushi Chamois wrote in regarding AB 20-154 capping delivery fees to restaurants. That was forwarded to council. The next one is Ton Win, also wrote in regarding capping delivery fees to restaurants. And the next one is Zyrong Chen, and also wrote in regarding capping of the delivery fees to restaurants. And then we have 4 people who are online to speak. The first one is Laura Escude. Mrs. Escude, are you there? Robin, can you patch her in, please?
Yep, she's on her way.
Great, thank you.
Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Escude. This is Laura. You have 3 minutes to speak starting now.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council and members of the city staff. Tonight, I'm speaking for my family, especially for my special needs daughter, Maria Teresa. She's disabled. And I just want to talk about the budget and the reconsideration for the city council to avoid at all cost any cut to the service, the human resources grant. We know people that really need it and they deserve to have those services. So we are really concerned. My second point is in regards to the diversity position. Residents of City of Bothell have spoken that we need to fill up that position. We have a commission recommended, as well as a lot of people in my neighborhood, and they have listened some of the last city councils, the concerns that some of the city council members don't understand or they wanted to learn more about the needs in regards to diversity in our city. So I will beg you to listen, to empathize with our population and make the city of Bothell the next step in the future. There are a lot of things to create economical opportunities for people with disability, and maybe that person will help that to shorten the gap between all those communities and help to the economical development of the city. And one more thing, and the last, I would like to have some sort of update about why the bridge at the Bothell landing is still closed. A notice or something when it's going to be open will be helpful. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. The next person I have on my list is Brittany Caldwell.
Here she comes.
Thank you. Brittany, you have
Hi.
Starting now.
Wonderful. Hello, Brittany Caldwell, Executive Director of the Bothell-Kenmore Chamber of Commerce. Wonderful to see you all. I am here first and foremost to say thank you for supporting the business community throughout this pandemic. It has been incredibly challenging, as you all know, and we want to express our gratitude. Providing PPE supplies for businesses, providing flexibility with outdoor dining and public area use permits, providing the grants for businesses, the Bothell Cares discount program that was created by city staff, and continuing to provide updates at our general meeting. Thank you, Mayor Olson, and ongoing participation at chamber events. Thank you all so much for that partnership. As we enter another round of shutdowns, businesses need our support more than ever. One way we can support our Bothell restaurants is by supporting an ordinance to cap third-party delivery fees at 15%. So our chamber represents nearly 40 restaurants of our membership, which is about 400 members. 40 of those are local restaurants and beverage providers. In our outreach to those members, those using third-party delivery companies are currently paying an average of 30%. So if you can imagine a restaurant that has very thin margins, it makes a huge difference. They're desperate for cost savings and every dollar counts. So although many restaurants anticipated being here tonight and advocating on their own behalf, many of them are scrambling to make adjustments with staff and their operations with Governor Inslee's latest announcement. So I am here to advocate on their behalf. So as a chamber, we're going to be doing things to support our business community. We're creating an Operation Takeout program to support our restaurants. And we ask that you tonight consider the third-party delivery fee cap. And while I'm here, and according to my clock, I have a few extra minutes, I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you also for supporting the Bothell Visitor Center through lodging tax dollars. We're looking forward to reopening our visitor center on Main Street and being able to greet guests and visitors, and want to thank you for ongoing support for that. And lastly, our chamber is unique because we represent over 50 nonprofits in our area. So we did submit a letter today in support of human services funding for local nonprofits. So including everyone from the North Shore Senior Center, YMCA, Health Point, and many others. The number of Bothell residents in need is clear, and we anticipate this need to grow. No single organization can meet the needs of our diverse diverse community, and we want to keep our network of resources strong. So we ask that you consider keeping funding for our human services in the upcoming budget. So thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for supporting our community, our businesses, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Chad Horrell from DoorDash.
Hello, my name is Chad Horrell and I'm with DoorDash. Appreciate the opportunity to provide the members of the council information about our company and our view on the proposed commission cap under consideration. While well-intended, the ordinance's limit to commissions on third-party food delivery could result in unintended consequences, including lower restaurant volume, less in earnings for delivery drivers, lower tax revenue, and less access for food delivery for Bothell residents who rely on it during the ongoing pandemic. This outcome can be avoided by an alternative approach that meets the goals laid out by the council while alleviating unnecessary harm to the restaurant industry during these extraordinary times. A 15% cap on commissions would have a negative impact on all parties, restaurants, customers, drivers, and companies like DoorDash. This could lead to a reduction in volume, which not only hurts restaurants, but also drivers and customers as well. We would recommend changes to the existing language to include a cap of 20%, plus the ability to pass through payment processing fees. Restaurants should be able to agree to pay third-party app-based food delivery platforms an extended amount per online order to obtain optional products, such as advertising, marketing, access to customer subscription programs, or other promotional features, which help restaurants attract new customers and increase sales. These additional costs would be incurred on an opt-in contractual basis. Additionally, because the goal is to support the small, locally owned restaurants, we recommend applying the cap to those with fewer than 5 locations in the state of Washington. Many chain restaurants are doing just as well, or in some cases better, during COVID-19. Many also account for the commissions they incur through inflated menu prices to offset the cost and likely are not in need of the relief the council is seeking as much as smaller restaurants. And finally, we recommend that the ordinance expire on February 28, 2021, with the ability for the city council to repeal or extend if necessary. Commission caps should be temporary measures tied to COVID-19's effect on indoor dining. Again, we respectfully request that the above changes be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, I have, sorry, 1 second, Rami Alcabra. Robin, is he on his way?
I'm sorry, I was having issues getting my mic to unmute. I've got Rami there. He is in the meeting. I see us.
Hi.
There he is. Okay.
Thank you.
It took Zoom a second to join me, but thank you for allowing me, and good to see everybody again. And you might be surprised to hear this, but I 100% agree with your proposal for capping the delivery fees, because the small businesses, the small restaurants in the area, which are, as the DoorDash person said, mostly 1 or 2 locations, are affected the most here in the Bothell city. So I 100% support this, and that's all I wanted to say in this one. More to come in the public hearings.
Great, thank you. That's all I have for visitor comment.
Great, thank you. So that will take us over onto our next item, the consent agenda. So nothing was pulled, so I'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Agnew.
I move we pass the consent agenda. Excuse me.
Councilmember Dewar.
I second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Agnew to pass the consent agenda with a second by Councilmember Dewar. Any discussion on the item? All right, seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yea or nay when I state your name. Councilmember Thompson,
Yay.
Councilmember McAuliffe. Councilmember McAuliffe, can you unmute yourself? Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, great, thank you. Councilmember McNeil,
Yay.
Mayor Olson,
Yay.
Councilmember Dorr,
Yay.
Councilmember Agnew.
Yay.
And please let the record show that Councilmember Zorns is still trying to log in. She's having some technical difficulties, so the motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, our next item on the agenda is AB 20-151. So we have a public hearing on revenues for the 2021-2022 biennium and the 2021 City of Bothell property tax levy in consideration of adopting the 2021 property tax levy. So I will now open a public hearing for this agenda item, and I will turn it over to Director Chris Bothell.
Stopped my video, so if you can turn it on, you can see me. I don't have a presentation though, so I'll just start anyway. All right, so I just have a brief introduction for the public hearing. The revenue forecast was developed earlier this year and was first presented in June during the pre-budget workshops. Forecast updates have been presented on several occasions thereafter. The complete forecast is available in the preliminary budget book on the city's website. The forecasted revenues include a property tax levy with the following components for King and Snohomish counties. A regular property tax levy to support public safety and general government operations, a voter-approved safe streets and sidewalks levy, a voter-approved public safety levy, and a voter-approved levy to fund fire station reconstruction. The proposed levy also includes a property tax on new construction and improvements added to the tax rolls since the 2020 levy, a re-levy of refunds resulting from property valuation adjustments initiated by property owners, and the allowable annual increase. The total value of the 2021 property tax levy, including all of the preceding, is approximately $25 million, and the levy value included in the proposed legislation is assumed in the preliminary and final budgets. The per capita annual increase for the proposed 2021 regular and voter-approved levies combined is approximately $6 per year. And a reminder that Bothell's total levy accounts for between 17 and 21% of the total property taxes collected within the city. State law requires that the city hold a public hearing to solicit public comment on revenues for the biennial budget and the proposed 2021 property tax levy. That's your introduction.
Thank you very much. So does anyone have any comments or questions? Oh, City Clerk, do we have any visitor comments on this item?
We do. We received one written comment regarding this item from Siram Gopalan, and that comment was forwarded to council and will be made part of the record. Thank you. That's all we got.
All right, thank you. All right, does anyone have any comments or questions? Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Director Bothell. A question for you. So 1% is the maximum allowable that we can take in any year, regardless of inflation, correct? Do you know how long it's been? Sorry, I thought I saw you nod. Okay. Do you know how long it's been since inflation was under 1%?
So I've been doing this for 7 years, and this is the second year where it's been under 1%. Generally, the Fed tries to 2% is where the Fed wants it to be. Usually it's been between 1.5% and 2.5% over the last like 7 years. But this is only the second time. Well, I think it's 3 times since 2001 when the 1% limitation was put into place. I think this is the third year. So in 20 years, we've had it 3 times below 1%.
Okay, and each one of those other years, those other 17 years, we're essentially losing money to inflation, correct? So in effect, property taxes are going down in 17 of those years relative to what a dollar buys, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. Is there any, in the levies that were written, is there language in those levies that essentially assumes that 1%? So like when the voters taxed those, or when the voters approved those, are they assuming that 1% bump?
So yes, so state law allows that when voters approve a levy, a voter approved levy lid lift, that you can go up to 6 years of a different, where you're not bound to the 1%, and you can do like whatever you present to voters effectively, that would be generally consistent with inflation.
Okay. I mean, that's all I've got. It seems like if 17 years we're losing money and property taxes are effectively getting cheaper for what a dollar buys, in a year where we have to up it by 0.4%, that seems fairly reasonable, especially given our financial condition at this point in time. And if the voters approve those levies with that language in it already, I'm content with this.
All right, anyone else on this item? All right, seeing no further comments or questions, I'll look for a motion to move forward on this ordinance. Councilmember Agnew.
I move the recommended action on this motion.
And just for purposes of clarification, if I may, there are actually two ordinances that you'll be adopting. There's the ordinance for significant need and the property tax ordinance itself. So for clarification purposes, Councilmember Agnew, did you intend the recommended action of adopting both ordinances?
I did the recommended action of both ordinance, the ordinance of significant need to provide funding for essential local government services.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Dewar.
I'll second that motion.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Agnew, a second by Councilmember Dewar. Any discussion on the item? All right, seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yay or nay when I call your name. Councilmember Thompson,
Yay.
Councilmember McAuliffe,
Yay.
Councilmember McNeil,
Yay.
Mayor Olson,
Yay.
Councilmember Dewar,
Yay.
Councilmember Agnew,
Yay.
and Deputy Mayor Zorns is still not with us, so the motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. So that takes us on to our next item, AB 20-152. So it's a public hearing for the consideration of adoption of two ordinances establishing the EMS levy in the Snohomish County portion of Bothell for 2021.
And Mayor Olson, if I may, this is that awkward time of the year where we have to take a recess from being council members, and then you have to call to order the Bothell Urban Emergency Medical Services District Board. You then become the chair. Deputy Chair Zorns becomes the deputy chair, and everyone else is a board member. So would you like me to state that again?
Yes, thank you very much. I was not able to write it down as fast as you said it.
So at this point, you would need to take a recess from the city council meeting, and then immediately thereafter call to order the meeting for the Bothell Urban Emergency Medical Services District Board. You can then, in your capacity as the chair of the board, discuss this item and vote on it. At the conclusion of this discussion, you would then adjourn from being the board, and then you would return to the city council meeting, which is all pro forma. It's just a matter of, like, you have to do this, but it's annoying and it's weird. And it was kind of one of my great joys when Andy Rayon was the mayor, when he would call people council members to correct him and say, do you mean board members? So,
Thank you for the fair warning. I'll see if I can be successful with that one. So I will call, or I will put to recess our city council, and I will call to order the Urban Emergency Medical District Board for discussion of a public hearing for the consideration of adoption for 2 ordinances establishing the EMS levy in the Snohomish County portion of Bothell for 2021. And looks like we have Director Chris Bothwell for this one as well.
Hello again. All right, the Snohomish County EMS levy is a property tax levy that provides funding for emergency medical services within the Snohomish County portion of the city. The proposed legislation includes the value of the 2020 levy plus a levy on new construction and improvements added to the tax rolls since the 2020 levy, plus a 1% annual increase. That's it.
All right. Any board members have any questions for the director? Board Member Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Olson. Is there anything substantive in this discussion that's different from the last agenda item we spoke about, Director Bothwell?
Very, very similar.
Okay, that's it.
Board Member Agnew.
If there's no other comment, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the 2 proposed ordinance authorizing a 1% increase in the EMS levy for 2021 due to substantial need, and establishing the 2021 EMS levy for Snohomish County portion of Bothell.
Board Member Dewar.
I second that motion.
All right, thank you. So I have a motion by Board Member Agnew, a second by Board Member Dewar. Any further discussion on this item?
I will add that we did not receive any public comment on this public hearing at all.
Thank you very much, City Clerk. All right, seeing no further discussion, on to you, City Clerk.
Please say yay or nay when I state your name. Board Member Thompson.
Yay.
Board Member McAuliffe.
Yay.
Board Member McNeil.
Yay.
Chair Olson.
Yay.
Board Member Dorr.
Yay.
Board Member Agnew.
Yay.
And let the record reflect that Co-Chair Zorns is absent. Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. So,
and at this point, we adjourn the meeting of the Bothell Urban Emergency Medical Services District Board and resume the council meeting.
All right.
And you got it on your first try. Former Mayor Ray never did. So.
Oh, it was. Board Member Thompson wasn't helping me with all his smiling and anticipation of my first slip up. But all right, I will adjourn the Urban Emergency Medical Services District Board, and I will call back to order the Bothell City Council for this evening. And looks like we have another public hearing for, actually, let's take a 10-minute break before we move on to this next one and see if we can get Deputy Mayor Zorns on with us. Thanks, everyone.
me as you go down the list. I'll probably let you know who I see and who I don't see. And there's only one attendee that has the name at City of Bothell. I'm assuming that that is a staff member and not not someone wanting to speak. But we can ask people if we've missed anyone to use the raise hand feature. If you, look at the attendee list, you can see, you're seeing Nicole? I don't see Nicole.
I see Andrew. I see Andrew, Angela, Barbara Anderson.
Right, but not all of those people that are attending the meeting are actually requested. Did they? Oh, you know what? My apologies. I'm looking at the wrong list. I'm looking at the written comment list.
Okay.
We're good. I think everybody's here. My bad.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Oh, we're done. Sorry.
You lied.
We are on to AB 20-153, public hearing on the final 2021-2022 budget and consideration of an ordinance adopting the final 2021-2022 budget. So I will now open the public hearing and turn it over to City Manager Jennifer Phillips.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm going to share my presentation with you. All right. Can you all see that in? Great. Well, good evening. This is the public hearing for the 2021-2022 final budget for the city of Bothell. What I'm going to do this evening is go through a review of where we were, where we are in 2019-2020, which is the current biennium that we're in. I'm going to do an overview of 21-22. Talk a little bit again about the revenues. Much of this information you've heard before, but I think it's important for the public hearing to review this information. So go over the revenues, the expenditures, the general fund reserve, council priorities, and then I'm looking for final policy direction with hopes of being able to adopt the budget this evening. So let's go through the current biennium that we're in. So when we started, it's been now 2 years since we were all together and we worked on the 2019-2020 budget. And that was a difficult process as well. That was when we really started first talking about the structural deficit and some of the changes that we were going to need to make. And council took that process very seriously. We met, just like we did this year, in a long workshop of 12 hours, and met again to go through the preliminary budget and the final budget. And we put some strategies together to start addressing this structural deficit. And you can see the list here of things that the council wanted to accomplish in 2019-2020. And I'm sorry to say, we didn't get a whole lot done this year with regards to the financial strategy. We did not increase or maintain the general fund reserve to any significant a measurable amount that really makes a difference for the policies that the council adopted. We did not make contributions to the asset replacement fund. We did make good progress on the downtown cleanup for the properties. That's very important for our financial stability. We are in the process of selling a Lot D, and then it would be a one-time cash infusion that would be very important to support us for our one-time expenses. We did not identify any funding for the sports fields, for the 2 turf replacements and a new turf for one of the fields that currently grass. We did develop and adopt financial policies. And again, that's where we're talking about the general fund reserve, and the policy is to achieve a 3-month operating reserve, which we are not achieving. Identify ongoing revenue for the city's $3.2 million City Hall lease payments. That's an ongoing expense. And one of the goals was to incorporate that into our ongoing revenue, and we have not been able to achieve that. And we also talked about considering additional revenues. During 2019-2020, the council was not interested, and we did not bring forward any additional revenue options. We didn't make as much progress as we had hoped. But part of putting a strategy together is starting to talk about the challenges and taking steps. And we did take some steps this year. When balancing the 2019-2020 budget, we did use some speculative revenue, and that was the sale of Lot A that I had hoped would sell quickly, and it did not. It is under a purchase and sale agreement with a nonprofit for affordable housing, which is very exciting and one of council's top priorities, but it did not close in 2020, and so those revenues were not realized. We did continue careful financial management in 2019. in preparing for what we knew was going to be a challenging 21-22 budget. So as we managed through 19 and 20, we knew that preparing this budget, we talked about this 2 years ago, that 21-22 would be challenging. What we certainly didn't expect were the impacts of a global pandemic. So that's had further impacts on our financial challenges. And we did lay off 14 positions. We furloughed staff for a period of time in 2020. We did significant limitations to overtime, and we put basically a hiring freeze on general fund positions to the best of our ability. Thankfully, we received CARES Act funding to reimburse for a portion of the expenses that we have for, for responding to the COVID crisis. And that helped replenish some of the expenses, some of the monies that we had to expend to respond to the crisis. Right now, our general fund reserve projection is about 10.7 million. So that is a small increase from the prior year and what the prior budget and what we had expected, and barely meets the minimum of the 2-month operating reserve. And council's policy is a 3-month operating reserve. We were able to accomplish this because of the early actions that we took. They were early and they were strategic. Again, laying off and furloughing staff and the hiring freezes and limit on overtime, so that we were able to stabilize the budget during 2022. So I'm very proud. I really appreciate council's support and very proud of the actions that we took early so that we could make a difference in 2020 and not use the general fund reserves that we might have had we not taken these actions. This is a chart that I showed to the council 2 years ago, and I think it's a really important chart. So we've updated it with 21 and 22 projections. And the areas that I've highlighted are particularly important. And this was actually new information to the council when I presented it to you 2 years ago, and why it's so important that although sometimes these budget meetings can be long and detailed at times, it's really important that information is shared. And I think this was the kind of information that wasn't as openly shared as the discussions that we're having today, that I'm very proud of, and I appreciate council's time and attention to these kinds of details. And the yellow highlighted area in the middle shows how low the general fund reserve was dropped. And most notably is 2016. At the end of 2016, it was at 1.3%. That is shockingly low. So you had $600,000 in the unrestricted fund balance at the end of 2016. To rectify that, we moved over, and I started in January of 2017. So we transferred $8.5 million from the proceeds of the sale of some of the properties in the downtown to shore up the general fund. So this was not done through any ongoing revenues or any savings. This was taking one-time monies and putting it in the general fund reserve so that there would be a reserve. So it's critically important that we continue to manage this reserve and that we maintain those funds in the reserve, and that we continue to work towards achieving council's strategy towards a 30-day general fund, a 3-month general fund reserve. And you can see what happens when we don't. Those are unacceptable amounts in the general fund reserve, and it's very important that we stay focused. So throughout this presentation and as we've been talking about the budget during this year in preparation for this, I've repeatedly talked about the general fund reserve, as has Finance Director Bothell, and this is why. It is really one of the key aspects of our financial health. All right, so that's 2019-2020. So moving on to 21-22. Just going over a little bit of how we got here. So normally our budget process, we start in the beginning of the year with a council goal setting. And we had that planned, we had it scheduled, we had it planned, we were ready to go. And unfortunately COVID hit and we had to cancel that March goal setting workshop. So what we did instead, because we couldn't meet, is that I used council's goals from 2019-2020 as guidance in preparing the preliminary budget. In June, we met for 3 nights, almost 12 hours again, and we reviewed in detail each department's budgets. We talked about expenditure reductions, what we could do to save, to make savings, to have savings for 21, 22. We talked about positions that had been cut. We talked about our challenges in each of the departments and the level of service we would be able to deliver and things we wouldn't be able to do. At that time, we also talked about the revenue projections and the challenges that all of us are having in projecting revenues because of the impacts of COVID. And there's so much unknown, and how we did our projections and why, and that there is still so much uncertainty with regards to the projections for revenues for the rest of 2020 and 21, and 22 for that matter. After that, I brought back some proposed goals. On July 7th, Council had a discussion about goals, but did not confirm the goals or make a decision about goals. And so I continued to prepare the budget based on the feedback that I received in June and Council's goals from 2019-20. I presented the preliminary budget on October 6th. Again, trying to base that on the council's goals and what I understood to be the priorities. Most importantly, what I heard from the workshop was that financial stability was the #1 priority of council. And I understand there's so many wonderful services we provide and there's so many good things that we provide, but I heard unequivocally during that workshop that financial stability needed to be the top priority as the budget was put together. And so to the best of my ability, I tried to present a budget that isn't balanced, it's legally balanced, but it does use general fund reserves because additional cuts would be so painful. So I presented that on October 6th and received no additional policy direction from council to make any changes. There was a public hearing held on October 20th. Council had a discussion again, and I received no policy direction from a majority of the council to make any changes. And here we are on November 17th for a public hearing on the final budget. So again, we look at our strategies. For 21-22, we want to pursue that financial sustainability. That is a goal of the council. I think it's absolutely accurate. I'm very respectful that you understand the importance of being a financially sustainable organization. We want to continue to work to reduce the structural deficit that we do have. And again, the structural deficit means fundamentally we're spending more than we're making. We want to try to continue to right-size the organization. I'll mention multiple times through this organization, we've already laid off 14 people. Those were not 14 vacant positions. Those were 14 positions that were filled with individuals and they were laid off from this organization. We want to look at adopting revenue enhancements. We'll be bringing those. I'll talk about that again. We cannot cut our way out of this structural deficit. Additional revenues are going to need to be adopted so that we can balance this budget and budgets moving forward. We want to maintain and increase the general fund reserve. We want to ensure that the enterprise funds pay for city services, and we had a long discussion about that on October 6th, as well as when utilities came forward with their rate increases. And we have made that shift so the utilities are carrying their full freight and are an independent enterprise. And so we've made those changes. And we also want to continue with the policy that we use proceeds from the property sales only for one-time expenses and not for ongoing expenses, because that's how structural deficits only continue. Right, so the budget strategy, again, talking about the revenues, it is very difficult to estimate revenues during these unknown and uncertain economic times. We just don't know. Here we are again in a closure. And so that will impact our revenues again. How, we don't really know. As Director Bothell has presented in his reports, Bothell has held up fairly well, again, because we have a sales tax base that is really very essential needs based. We don't have a mall, we don't have an auto mall, we have a Home Depot, we have things that are really part of people's essential needs. And we had what we believe is higher sales from online shopping, which then we receive the sales tax. So we don't know if that trend will continue. And so what we've tried very hard to do is forecast our revenues to be conservative yet realistic. So not to be overly optimistic, but also not to be so pessimistic that further cuts are needed just to balance the budget. We reduced expenses while focusing and maintaining core services because we know how important that is to the council and the community. Additional reductions will not support this strategy. So we just we can't get through and balance the budget in future years and this year just through cuts. We have cut, again, we cut the 14 positions. Most of that work didn't go away. It has been absorbed painfully. We've redistributed that work, and individuals who remain in this organization have taken on an even heavier workload than they had before the layoffs. We really do need to look at securing revenue enhancements just to maintain those core services. We're not looking for revenue enhancements to enhance services. We need revenue enhancements just to balance the budget and maintain the services we have today. What I've talked about and Director Bothell has talked about over the last 6, 7, 8 months is we really need to focus on 21. We will come to you in late 2021 with the Biennium amendment, and that will be the opportunity for us to see what's happened over the last 12 months, better understand the revenues and the impacts of the COVID pandemic, and be able to make necessary adjustments. So we'll be talking about revenue enhancements during 2021, and then we can look at where our expenditures are, where those revenues are, and we can make further adjustments, whether that's further cost cutting, whether that's a reduction of services, but we can have that conversation. What we're trying to do is buy time with a reasonably balanced budget that supports the council's priorities and goal, as well as trying to maintain fiscal sustainability throughout this 2021, giving us a chance to take a breath and not make drastic decisions with insufficient data. We also want to focus on the council priorities. We tried very hard to do that. There are very, very limited new initiatives because we just don't have the money. So many of the council priorities are very similar to your council goals from 2019-20. And so those priorities are continuing, and many of the initiatives that we were working on basically through what we consider the machine, those will continue, and we will bring more information about that to you early next year. So just an overview, again, our general fund, our projected general fund revenue is about $109 million for the 2-year period. And we plan to spend about $111 million, which means if everything played out exactly as we laid out in this budget, we would spend $2.1 million more than we brought in revenue. So we talk about revenue, and we talk specifically about a couple of key revenues, and I've circled them here. So we talk about charges for services, property tax, sales tax, utility tax, and license and permits. And I think this pie chart shows you why we focus on those revenues, especially the main 3, charges for services, property tax, sales tax will mean 4, and utility taxes, because you can see what a large portion of our budget that those revenues come from, and that's why we talk about those. So when we talk about sales tax, we're looking at we projected a modest decline compared to 2019 for 21. Normally, we would project year-over-year increases in sales tax, but we've seen a small decline in 2020, and so we're projecting a small decline when compared to 2019 because we just don't know what's going to happen in 2021. In 2022, we've restored collections of sales tax back to the high in 2019. So we feel that that's reasonable. Again, not overly optimistic, but also not overly pessimistic. Property taxes, we did a decrease to new construction. You just passed the allowable increase for property taxes. And we don't know if individuals will pay a little bit slower or default on their property taxes, which could also have an impact on our cash flow. Utility taxes, we did an inflationary increase for 2021. You've already approved that. However, there is, and I'm going to mention this several times so that it's very, very clear, there is a 2% increase in the utility taxes in 2022, and that falls under councilmatic authority. That would generate about $550,000. There is also a business license fee increase in 2022. There is none planned for 2021. That would be another $1 million in revenue. It's very, very important to understand that $1.5 million is speculative revenue that has been put into 2022 to help balance this budget, because again, we're focused on 2021. We want to come back to council with those revenue options. So right now that revenue is in there helping the council balance this budget. If those revenues were not in there, your deficit would be $3.6 million instead of 2.1. We also kept development fee revenue at the same levels as 2019. We also think that that's a realistic revenue forecast. So when we look at expenditure forecasts, I think it's really important to look at how much we're doing from capital and infrastructure and how little is going towards general government. It's about 11%. And so you can see the breakdown of how generally funds are expended for the city of Bothell. For forecasts, salaries are slightly increased for contractual obligations. Healthcare costs, which are out of our control, are estimated between 5 and 8%, depending upon the plans. We tried very hard, no other benefits, no other increases. And again, departments implemented cuts, the cuts of 14 positions. We continue to seek efficiencies and reduced expenses where we felt it was possible without dramatic impact on services. Our vacancy strategy is to, when we have any current vacancies, we assess those very, very seriously and ensure that we absolutely have to fill that position. And we'll do that with future vacancies as well. We don't just fill positions because they become vacant. We go through a process to make sure that that position is absolutely necessary in the delivery of core services for our community. And again, that's why we're focused on the core services. Really want to make sure that we continue to deliver those core services. And the enterprise funds are being charged for the support that the city is providing. And that has been a significant assistance to the general fund to be able to collect those revenues from our utilities. Also in 2021-22, the asset replacement was reduced to only critical replacements. And what that means is that every year, whenever we purchase any kind of capital purchase, what we do is we anticipate the useful life of that and what the replacement cost of that capital asset would be at the time of replacement. And so let's say we purchase something and it has a useful life of 7 years. We're supposed to put 1/7 of that amount away every year. So at the end of the 7 years, when we need to replace that asset, the money is there to do that. Basically, our asset replacement fund for all of the equipment that we have, other than the vehicles, there is no money there. And so because there was no money, we fund our asset replacements through ongoing revenues. And so we went through again, just like we did in 1920, and we really scrubbed the list of equipment that needs to be replaced, as well as the vehicles, to make sure that these were absolutely necessary replacements. And that's what we have budgeted for in the 21-22 budget. We did make a contribution of $600,000 towards the North Creek Ball Field turf replacement because that was a priority that was identified by the City Council in 2019-20. As a reminder, because of the great work of the parks crews, that we've been able to extend the useful life of those turf fields, but the director feels very strongly that by 2023, those fields will no longer pass the stress test. And when they cannot pass that test, they are deemed unsafe and cannot be used, and those ball fields would be closed. So we wanted to put some monies aside to make progress towards being able to replace at least one of those turf fields. So we did do that. We put in $600,000 aside for that. Again, the asset replacement fund remains significantly underfunded. And we were able to put $1 million of general fund towards the City Hall lease payment, but $1.8 million is funded by the REIT 1 monies. And we've talked about the volatility of the REIT 1 money. So the goal that council had in 2019 and 2020 to incorporate the full amount of the lease payments into ongoing revenue is not being achieved in this budget. So we are still not able to afford the lease payments on our City Hall. Our projected fund balance at the end of 2020, as I mentioned earlier, is 10.7 million. Again, we plan to use 2.1 million to balance the budget, leaving a projected fund balance of 8.6 million. This is just slightly under the minimum 2-month operating reserve. And again, your policy states that your target would be 13.2 million. This was the chart that was presented by Director Bothell a few weeks ago, and I think it's a very, very important, and I presented this as well 2 years ago. So this is the REIT, the excise, real estate excise sales tax receipts, and a forecast. So you can see the volatility of the REIT revenues. And so what we've done is we projected fairly stable, fairly high REIT revenues for 21 and 22, increasing in later years. And boy, history sure doesn't support that. But again, we're trying not to be overly draconian, but it's very important to understand that if REIT revenues were to suddenly drop like they did during the Great Recession, that $1.8 million would not be available to pay the lease payment, and it would need to come from the general fund. Moving into the council priorities and goals, this is a list of your goals and priorities. Just as a reminder, so focus on long-term financial sustainability. This was your top priority coming out of that workshop. Maintain our existing infrastructure, provide a safe and secure community, support our community's recovery from COVID-19, strive for environmental sustainability, and you adopted a goal to pursue equity through inclusive community engagement. Very briefly, and I shared this before on October 6th, these would be some of the strategic objectives that we would work towards in 2021 and 22. So just a list of some of those items, you can see them there. I won't read them off. Safe and secure Bothell. These would be things that we could move, have initiatives towards. Implementation of red light and school zone cameras was something that the council expressed interest in. The consideration of shared services, so we continue on those with those discussions, looking for opportunities to find different ways to deliver fire services. The Resource Center Community Court certainly has been something we've talked a lot about. Recovery from COVID-19, business recovery and resiliency. Our economic development program and our manager has been a really important force through these last 8 to 9 months as our businesses have struggled. So some of the items that we would work on under that. Existing infrastructure, these are the things that we would normally do. One of the new ones is to create a security officer position. That's actually not a new position. It's actually an enhancement of an existing position and only costs $40,000 a year. And so you also asked to fund the senior long range planner position. That is not a new position. That was a position that was vacant. And the question was, would you like it to remain vacant as a cost savings, or did you want to fill that position? And so your direction was to fill that position. So funding is included for that position. Environmental sustainability was added. This is a new slide. This is some of the great continuing work that team is doing towards environmental sustainability. And then the diversity, equity, inclusion initiative, work that could begin to work towards council's goal on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'd like to just briefly go through very, very high level. And although this is a budget presentation, these are not exact numbers. The idea is just to remind the council and the community of basically what's already been cut out of the various departments. So as we go through this, it's not intended to be an exact dollar amount. It's intended to be an information, two slides of information about the department budgets. So Parks and Recreation cut $550,000 out of their operating budget, and we did postpone $2 million in turf replacements. Those turf replacements were due for this biennium, so in 21-22. Community Development reduced their budget by $1 million. And all of these reductions fundamentally are people. Fire postponed a ladder truck replacement that was due, that there's no money to be able to do that replacement. That's a $1.5 million price tag. And at some point that ladder truck will need to be replaced, and we will have to find funds to be able to do that. Police reduced their budget by $500,000. They laid off 4 positions. But we did see an increase in personnel costs, and they're in line with all the other city personnel cost increases. Their budget is just much larger, just like fire. They both have very large numbers because they're personnel heavy. And so the number becomes larger, but the personnel costs are basically the same. Those are healthcare and other benefits, as well as contractual obligations that we have that the city must follow through on. There's also the levy. And it's very important to understand that the levy was passed to maintain and enhance public safety. And so that's what we're doing. 60+% of the voters passed to maintain and enhance public safety. And so that's what this budget does, is it continues with that and includes the public safety levy. However, based on the discussions that we had in June, I believe that there's an opportunity to use some of the levy monies for a community court resource center that is in the spirit of what public safety is. And as the national discussion changes our definition of public safety, what does that look like for Bothell? And there's opportunities to use levy monies to move forward with a community court, drug court type of model. Again, just some final departments: human resources, 100,000, IS, 2 people, they lost a person and a half, 400,000, legal, 35,000, public works, nearly 500,000, the court, 50,000, and in the executive office, that was $750,000, and that was specifically the non-funding of the human services grants. So moving into those human services grants, that's certainly been a topic of discussion, and we've received a lot of public comment, and I know that the council always appreciates that public comment. I provided some information in the agenda bill, but I just want to go through just a little bit of a history so those who maybe haven't been familiar with the human services grants have a better understanding of what we've been working on for the last couple of years. In 2017-18, we collaborated with cities in our area and went into a pooled program. We didn't find that the pool program really focused on service delivery in Bothell. And so we had been doing the human services grants internally, and it's a very heavy lift for staff. And so the decision had been made in 2016 to join this pool program. And the Human Services Committee was sort of underwhelmed with, is this really going to our Bothell community? And is it really effective way for us to distribute the human services money? And so then the decision was made to remove ourselves from the pooled program and go back to fully administering all the grants in-house. And so what the Human Services Committee talked about was to ensure that those funds were being directed to the Bothell community. And we know how important regional support is, and this council has been very supportive of being a regional partner. But when there are limited funds and we know our community needs the support, the subcommittee, or the Human Services Committee and the council as a whole really was interested in directing those funds to our Bothell community. We also had feedback on improvement in reporting and accountability, that staff was able to ensure that those funds were being used in the way that agencies were reporting, and there isn't a mechanism for us to do that. There is reporting by the agencies, but the follow-up and the accountability and the auditing is not occurring at this time. And then also options to reduce inefficiencies of administering. Was there a better way? We tried the pool program and that didn't work. And so the Human Services Committee was really interested in us looking for other options. And so we did that. We issued an RFP for the administration of the grants to see if there were other nonprofit groups that could be sort of the umbrella agency that then could, that had the relationships established with all of these human services providers and would be a better administrator and more effectively be able to administer these grants into our Bothell community. We didn't receive any responses. And then staff presented another idea of using some of the human services money and hiring a social worker to be on staff, to be here at City Hall, to be able to meet with citizens that came in, be able to provide some fundamental social work supportive services, but then also work with the human services, be able to make sure that we're connecting with the right agencies and funding the right agencies, and again, delivering services to the Bothell community. And the Human Services rejected that. They really weren't ready to have a position come in to be able to do that. So we discussed the Human Services grants at the budget workshop with the limited funding, and again, the priority on financial sustainability. The Human Services were not included in the preliminary budget that was discussed and presented on October 6th and October 20th. What we did present was the resource center and community court. And the conversation was that basically some funds from the human services that weren't in the budget could then be identified, and staff would come back with a proposal. The executive branch and the judicial branch, we would work together and come back with a proposal that would then identify what we would need for funding human services and being able to develop this community court and resource center. And so that was what was presented, and both on the 6th and the 20th, seeking any council feedback. I didn't receive any direction at that time from a majority of the council to make any changes, but there certainly was unanimous support from the council for the Community Resource Center and Community Court. I know the judge is just really passionate about this. She made a really passionate presentation about this, and I know how excited the council was then and hopefully still is about this opportunity to build this Community Resource Center and a community court. So again, we heard community feedback during the public hearing, and again, the last council meeting, and again this evening, to really reconsider the funding for the human services. And so the opportunity to fund, what I've done is tried to identify some funding to be able to do that. And so looking at the budget to utilize, there's an opportunity, or I'm providing an option for the council to utilize the $600,000 that have been set aside for the ball field replacement to instead utilize those for the human services grants. The other outstanding issue is the DEI initiative. So on October 15th, the council adopted a resolution creating the DEI goal of pursuing equity through inclusive community engagement. There were duties that were identified in a presentation on that evening, and it basically identified what existing staff could do towards working towards a DEI initiative, what a part-time staff and what a full-time staff would do. And that agenda bill also included the cost of an inclusion and engagement coordinator position of $120,000 a year. If the council is interested in this position, there is no funding identified at this time, but it would come from the operating reserve, and we would work on that in 2021. And if the council is interested in moving forward with this position, it could be added into the budget, either in a part-time or full-time capacity, and then I would look for the savings in 2021 to be able to fund this position. Some risks and opportunities. One of the risks, actual revenue in 2021. We could realize more and it could be less. We've really tried to do the best we can to forecast the revenues so that we can bring you a budget that is reasonable and professional, and with a level of confidence that we can deliver core services and that we have adequate revenues to be able to do that with some support from the general fund reserve. Again, we have unsecured revenues of 1.55 million. I just can't repeat that enough. I'm very uncomfortable putting unsecured revenues into a budget. I've actually never done it in my entire financial career, but it is a way to avoid draconian cuts while we go through 21 to try to better understand what our revenues are going to look like. Again, use of general fund reserves of 2.1 million. And if you choose to fund the entire DEI position, that would increase by 240,000. Use of the 600,000 for the human services grants, if approved, would take funding away from the asset replacement for the ball fields. And so we would just need to look for other opportunities to fund the replacement of those turf fields. The City Hall lease payments are still not being covered by ongoing revenue, which was a goal that I wasn't able to accomplish in this budget. And there is no inclusion of confirmed strategies to reduce the structural deficit. So we're still spending more than we're making. So we haven't made strides on reducing that structural deficit. Opportunities, we have Lot D under a purchase and sale agreement, but again, those are one-time monies, and we've identified the use of those monies to be the continued, to bring up the general fund reserve to your 3-month operating reserve to fund the continued cost of the downtown cleanup, which we know is extraordinarily expensive, and there's very limited funds that we can use to do that. And then be a backup for any lease payments that we're not able to afford through either REIT or the general fund. We hope to sell Lot P South in 2021, and we also hope that the culmination of the sale of Lot A will occur, which would be another $750,000. And And then shared services, you directed us in June to look for opportunities. Fire services is a very, very essential but expensive service. And are there opportunities to find ways to reduce the cost, keep the same level of service, but to reduce the cost of those services? So just an overview for the general fund reserve. And I'm gonna start and end with this comment. The current levels of service exceed revenue. The model must change towards eliminating the structural deficit if you want to achieve your goal of financial sustainability. Without the speculative revenue that's included, the budget deficit is $3.6 million. Reduction of $3.6 million in expenses would require elimination of discretionary and essential services, resulting in layoff of approximately 25 to 30 additional staff. This would have a dramatic impact on the organization and would take months of planning and really strategic planning to be able to do those kinds of draconian cuts at this time. And let's remember, it took many biennia to create this structural deficit. This is something many of us inherited, and it will take many more biennia to eliminate it. But what we're trying to do is take steps in that direction. We also want to continue to explore cost-saving measures to yield an organization that will continue to produce excellent results. I'm really proud of what we do in this organization and the level and quality of service that we deliver, and that we can continue to do that into the future for our community. We have to look at enhanced revenues, as difficult as that is, and I know these are going to be very difficult decisions and discussions for the council in 2021. Opportunities to look at things like a business license tax, a utility tax increase, card tab fees. Those must be used for road improvements, can't be used for any other uses, and potentially some kind of levy lid lift. We've already asked our community support our safe streets and sidewalks. We received the levy for the public safety, and then potentially need to go back and ask them again. The renewal of the safe streets and sidewalks will come in 2025. So we do need to think about the timing of how often we go back. If the council chooses to have that discussion, how often we go back to ask our citizens for additional levy lid lifts. Again, the mid-biennial budget amendment in 2021 will be the opportunity to really better understand where we are in 2021 and what we need to do. If we do have to do additional cuts in service or in positions, we can make those decisions later in 2021. I'm going to say it again, the current levels of service exceed revenues. The model must change towards eliminating the structural deficit. So what I'm asking for you tonight is to consider the final budget as presented. I need direction on the direct use of up to $600,000 for the human services grants, which are identified from the ball fields, and direct addition of a position for to support the council's diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. The next steps. Staff will identify the operating funds for any additional expenditures as directed by council. We will develop your council priorities and goal scorecard with the strategic objectives that we've been doing now for 4 years. And I would bring those to council for your consideration and adoption in early 2021. So we would have a discussion about the strategic objectives that we would put in place and the work that we would do towards accomplishing your priorities and your goal. We will also return in spring of 2021 and probably the summer to initiate discussions about and receive direction on revenue enhancements. And we have and will continue to provide quarterly reports to keep the council very informed of any changes in revenue and expenditures and just regular reporting, so you know where we are and you know the challenges and the opportunities that are arising during 2021. So you feel very connected financially as we go through 2021 together. So I know that was long, but I really appreciate your time and attention to this. I know some of it may have been repetitive, but I hope that it was helpful. And I am here to answer any questions you might have, as well as there is staff available. Director Bothell is with me, and any members of the executive team are sitting off in a side virtual room, but we're happy to answer questions and support you in any way as you deliberate on this final budget.
So city manager, as this is a public hearing, I know we have visitors waiting, and I don't know if, I think this would be a good time to hear from them. I know, they've already waited through hour and a half. So city clerk, I believe we got some written comments and we do have some live comments.
Thank you, Mayor Olson. Yes, we received 16 written comments. Most
I
of them.
can't hear you. It sounds like
Cannot hear me.
I don't see a mute button, but I can't hear you. Oh, all right. I think it was on my end.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mayor Olson, we received 16 written comments. Most of them had to do with the DEI and Human Services funding. So they were received from Nicole Dibble, Ann Nuss, Madison Fallon, Elaine Walsh, Sarah So, Amy Morse, Hannah Mendro, Megan Prine, Sabrina Susan Bates, Andrea Schaefer, Craig Breeden, Silji Sodol, Cameron Chapin, Rosemary Sutton, Athena Loescher, and Sarah Gustafson. Again, all of them were either in regards to the DEI position, human services funding, or both. And you received those. Those will be made part of the record, and council should have received all those written comments earlier today. So next we have 7 people who have requested to speak regarding the budget. So if you'll bear with us while we call them and panel them in one at a time. The first person I have is Barbara Anderson.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I speak tonight regarding the proposed 21-22 budget, specifically asking that you continue funding the North Shore Senior Center. I speak as a recipient of North Shore Services, a participant in its classes, and a volunteer with the center. I know firsthand how essential its programs and services are to people in this community. As a volunteer, I co-facilitate with a staff social worker one of several weekly virtual conversation groups for seniors. I cannot tell you enough how grateful participants are for these weekly contacts with others. They are free and available whether or not you have a computer. We anticipate adding more groups as the pandemic continues and isolation deepens during the dark winter. The center has moved many classes online during the pandemic, and they are essential for seniors. Seniors need to make sure that we keep our minds and bodies active, because if we don't, like pulling toilet paper from a roll, we will decline faster and faster. North Shore Senior Center provides exercise classes, yoga, martial arts, science, world events, art, music, and games online to help us stay engaged and active. The Senior Center cannot meet these needs without funding. Next is food vulnerability in our community. The center's food pantry helps more than 700 residents per week. On Fridays, we distribute boxes of produce and dairy donated by Washington State farmers. The line of cars on Fridays circles the parking lot, goes down the street, and crosses the bridge into downtown. We serve hot lunches Monday through Friday for pickup and delivery that keep hundreds more people from being hungry. That's in addition to our Meals on Wheels program. The need for food assistance will only grow as the economy worsens this winter and benefits expire. I will touch on one final area that North Shore Senior Center addresses for the Bothell community: emotional care and support. From my professional life, I know how essential support groups are for caregivers, people living with chronic conditions, and people who have experienced loss. I don't know if I'm still online or not. Let's see. The Senior Center provides groups and counseling virtually and telephonically for people in these situations. All of us know that tragically, the number of caregivers, chronic conditions, and grieving people in Bothell will continue to increase exponentially. North Shore Senior Center has experience and the infrastructure to meet these needs. However, as with everything else, it cannot do that without funding. I understand budget decisions this year are brutal and that city dollars must be spent wisely. Continuing to invest in North Shore Senior Center in 2021 is one of the wisest decisions you can make. Thank you for your commitment to the city we all love and for hearing my request.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrew Nelson.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, city councilors and city staff. Thank you for having me back. I'm here to talk about DEI today. First off, though, let me say I'm disappointed that it's proposed to be cutting human services during a pandemic where people are struggling. But that's another topic. I'm digressing. You know, for DEI, this is a very important position our community has been asking for months. This position would be for your constituency, for the people you represent. It would be for those most affected by inequality. You know, it would we would they would get data on things that are affecting our citizens negatively, and they would look at potential policies to make sure that they're equitable. You know, we need to make sure that everyone feels safe and wanted here for a day or for a lifetime. 300 people have signed a petition I made, and I think we should give them a win today and put this in our budget. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Next, we have Angela Maida. Angela, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Hello, council members. I strongly request for a motion and approval today for an inclusion and engagement coordinator with the promise of a full-time DEI staff position. I would like to share some crucial research in support of this staff position that is beautifully explained by Ibram X. Kendi, award-winning author, historian, and professor. His findings brilliantly describe how racism has become institutionalized and structural in our policies from the time of our country's birth. His work illustrates in detail the pattern and threat of racism in the systems of our society. The pattern of racism is this: racial discriminatory policies for self-interest, which creates racial ideas, then grows into ignorance and eventually evolves into hate. For example, racial discriminatory policies for self-interest of the majority can be seen in historical and widespread redlining in the US to make safe suburban communities for the majority, which keeps Black people in impoverished neighborhoods with minimal access to good schools, grocery stores, and growing communities, which in turn births racial ideas like Blacks as a racial group struggle to get ahead, which evolves into ignorance, like Black people are fundamentally inferior and just need to try harder, and eventually breeds into hate, as in Black people are dangerous, different, and other. The remarkable finding here is it always starts with racial discriminatory policies, which were generated by mere self-interest and sincere intentions and not an intent of harm. This has screaming implications for you all as people with the power to develop a more equitable base for residents of Bothell. Again, structural racism does not begin with hate. It begins with making decisions based on self-interest of the majority who are genuinely ignorant of the implications of their decisions for the underrepresented. What this means is that no matter how good our intentions are, unless we have a better way to understand the needs and implications of policies for the underrepresented, policies will fail those who are already suffering the most. All of this underscores, and I hope grips you to the core, that a full-time DEI position is not a nice to have in the 2021 budget to make a fair and safe Bothell, but an absolute prerequisite and fundamental anchor for our city. I'm thrilled to hear about the possibility for this position as well as human services to be put back into the budget. Please motion and pass these incredibly important services to Bothell. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kat Andes Tadros.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, sounds good. All right, so my name is Kat and I live in Bothell. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. And I think it's something kind of important to kind of mention that I'm aware that this is a really tough year financially. You know, a lot of the citizens of Bothell are feeling it. All over the world, we're feeling it just with the pandemic. And then I know that with the city, we're not, you know, it's also being impacted. And especially with the budget and things like that, I'm aware that there's a lot that kind of comes into play for that. But I think something just to kind of put a little bug in your ear in the sense of we have to focus on people. So making sure that we have a balanced budget is a really good thing to kind of aspire to. But at the same time, having this DEI position, I think this is going to be something that's really, really beneficial for the citizens of Bothell. And it's one of those things that it's not just going to affect the citizens that are here currently, it's going to be helping the future residents, it's going to be helping our kids, our grandkids. You know, this is going to be something that we're going to look back, you know, in 30 or 40 years and be like, this is a turning point in the history of Bothell where we can say, this is where we're able to kind of focus on a systemic change just from within the city and just helping with the kind of the systemic racism that we're seeing. And so again, this is something that I know with the budget and things like that, this is a really tough decision. There's been a lot of different cuts and I know that it's hard. It's really hard right now. But I just wanted to kind of put that bug in your ear in the sense of just making sure that we're also focused on the citizens as well and making sure that we're helping to be as inclusive as possible and that we're helping to set up a better city for not only us and the current citizens, but also our kids and grandkids as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Aditi John. And I hope I said that correctly.
Hello, my name is Aditi Jain. Hello, City Council members. I live in Bothell, and I'm here to talk about the massive need to divest from the public safety budget and specifically the Bothell Police Department and invest in community programs like mental health awareness and support, or as many others on this call have talked about, a DEI position. First of all, I would like to thank you for reducing the police budget by $500,000. It is a great start, but in order to be anti-racist, more must be done. Before I begin, I want to talk about the Stanford prison experiment. As many might know, it was an experiment where college students were assigned either the role of a police officer or the prisoner randomly. The college students who played the role of the police officer gradually assumed a powerful stance and treated the students that were playing the prisoners horribly, despite claiming to not want to hurt people at the beginning of the experiment. This is a classic example of how the role of police can never be just public safety in a community. Even if the police officers are subjectively good people, the corrupt system affords them too much power that is beyond what one should be capable of having. It is an abuse of power. Additionally, most of the calls that the police get assigned to require alternatives to policing. And this is an important distinction to consider. Do we want alternative forms of policing or alternatives to policing? The role of policing and finding alternatives must be addressed in the city of Bothell. In line with your goal of pursuing equity through inclusive community engagement, I urge the city to divest $1 million specifically from the police budget and allocate those funds towards mental health awareness and support for the community, especially during this isolating time. It is so important that the community's needs and wants are recognized within the budget and within the policy. The power granted to police departments is simply not something that our community needs, and this would be a step in the right direction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we have Barada Gomillion.
Muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, council members and city staff. I am Beretta Gamillion, Executive Director of the Center for Human Services. I testified last week regarding my concerns for the mental health of the community if human service funding is cut or eliminated. And I won't repeat myself tonight on that regard, but I do have a few points I'd like to make. Regarding the RFP that was sent out to human service organizations to help manage the human service grant program, no proposals were received. I would expect that to be true if it was put out again, actually. It's not surprising at all. We're human service providers and don't have expertise in managing grant programs. So I suggest that if you want to put the RFP out again, you send it to organizations or groups that actually manage grants as part of their core business. Also, as a provider, I think it should go without saying that the money you give us should go toward funding services for Bothell residents. I have no problem with that. And if that needs to be spelled out in a contract, do so. I want to point out too that 34% of the Bothell residents that CHS served in 2019 were Caucasian, which means that 66% were people of color. I'm disappointed when I saw the city manager's presentation, when I saw that it was not a council priority that you identified as a council priority goal for human services. You know, where's human services in that? And I also have trouble understanding if you put out an RFP to human services now, how you're going to have time to do that. That's the suggested method. I don't see how you'll have time to do that before the first of the year. I appreciate staff's option that prioritizes human beings and human services over the replacement of turf on ball fields, but it's still $150,000 less than the current year. And it seems like we're going down. The pool of providers is getting bigger, but the sum of the money is getting smaller. And council members, we're just going in the wrong direction. So I urge you to adopt a budget with the same amount of funding, if not more than what was allocated for human services in the last cycle. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. The last person I have on my list is Jenny Eldurks. Jenny, are you there?
Yes, I'm here and unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, City Council members and City staff. I'm speaking to you this evening as a member of the public who serves on the Bothell Planning Commission. I do not claim to represent the views of my fellow commissioners in this comment. I'm only speaking from my perspective, which is mine personally, but is also informed by my work on the Planning Commission. Almost 300 Bothell residents have called on the City Council to approve funding for a diversity, equity, and inclusion director position, like what the dive-in committee described in their report to Council on September 15th. However, the proposed position included in this week's agenda packet does not match what the community has called upon the City Council to prioritize in the budget. Removing equity from the title of this position indicates that the city is deprioritizing equity at a time when cities around the country and around our region are looking to address the historical and systemic inequities that American communities have inherited from prior generations. Choosing to perpetuate those inequities is a misguided effort at a time when the eyes of the community are on the city to evaluate our policies and address systemic inequities. The report, which the dive-in committee shared with Council, included the following in a description for the DEI director's duties and responsibilities. Quote, use the equity impact review tool in no less than 10 major policy, planning, budget, or facility siting plans, unquote. The Planning Commission has requested this type of equity analysis from a DEI director. Speaking from my perspective as a planning commissioner, I'm disappointed to see what I consider a watered down role addressing only diversity and inclusion after the Planning Commission's letter to council requesting equity analysis from a DEI director. A DEI director, like what the dive-in committee described in their report, should also have the responsibility to study and propose recommendations developed in partnership with diverse community members, which would then be able to address and ameliorate the systemic inequities that exist in our city. City council members, please do not cut equity from the job role for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Please insist on the hire of a DEI director who will work closely with boards and commissions and specialize in outreach to our underrepresented communities to make equitable and inclusive recommendations to city staff and council. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have on my list, Mayor Olson.
So I remember Rami Alcabra said he was planning on speak. He spoke earlier tonight, so you didn't have him signed up, or he wasn't on the line still?
I don't have him, but he may be in as an attendee and we can panel him in.
Yeah, he already spoke, I believe.
He spoke on an earlier item, and at that time he said he was planning on speaking on the budget.
Oh.
So I was just curious. It seems like he would have been.
He's there. We can panel him in and let him. He is still present. Robin, can you panel him in for me?
Yes, just give me a moment, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw in the script also that I should be asking if there's anyone else in the audience that wants to speak. So I don't know if there's anyone else that's on the line or not, but thank you for looking.
I have Rami in the meeting, but I'm not sure if he is present in front of his device.
Hello.
Oh, there he is.
The Zoom takes forever for it to load when you switched me over to the the cool kids club. So I'm sorry. Yeah. So thank you. And I don't know what the miscommunication probably on me getting onto the public hearings. Because I have some comments. I actually had comments on the tax levies, but I think that's late now since you all voted on that already. I'm gonna discuss the budget right now. Number one, I wish this presentation was, this excellent presentation was actually in the packet so we can look at it ahead of time and digest it. But it's very good information. I commend the city for finally listening to us, the residents of Bothell, regarding human services grants and dedicated equity coordinator position. Firstly, thank you for including funding for the human service grant. And as was mentioned earlier, it's not at the rate as it was in the past, but thank you for, again, prioritizing that over turf fields. And I understand that in a few years they won't be usable, but we can address that. We can cross that bridge when we get to it. Right now, people are suffering. We need to take care of the people right now. So thank you for doing that. And secondly, I'm struggling to understand a few things about the equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator that's discussed in the packet and in the presentation. It was mentioned that inclusion, the position will be called inclusion and engagement coordinator. And that was as the outcome of the great research by the dive-in committee in September and the work that folks there did. But that seemed to be mostly, almost all exclusively focused on City Hall improvements or work towards diversity inside City Hall, not the community at large. And the job title itself omitted the word equity, which also is the whole purpose of this position that we've been advocating for the community at large. The community, even right now, I don't know if there are plans to do it, but we weren't engaged to help define and set up this position and program. This indicating again that this is more City Hall focused than it is community at large focused. And I actually read through the 5-page long list of authorized position classifications, and the inclusion of that position wasn't listed there. Maybe that's because it wasn't approved yet, but I noticed that it wasn't listed there. There are also two values of the salary mentioned. One is 120K and one is 240K. I don't know why there are two values mentioned for the salary. The packet says 120K, and at some point in the presentation, Jennifer's mentioned 120K, but at the end she said 240K, so I don't know what that is for. And I didn't want to get into budgets because previously Aditi did an awesome job on that, so I'm not going to get into that. I hope you listen to that and digest it, because it does seem to us from the outside unfair to cut human services or funding for essential things to have right now for the sake of increasing other budgets that don't seem to be necessary, at this point in time.
Thank
and
you,
we
Mr.
understand the need.
Cabra. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. I have more.
Mayor Olson, I'm not showing anyone else on the attendee list that would like to speak.
All right, thank you. And thank you for everyone taking time out of your evening to come and speak on our items tonight. So City Manager, we'll move back to our questions and comments and discussion on this public hearing. I'd like to go first. So I really appreciate the discussion of how we got here, especially, one of our council goals was the financial stability of the city. The COVID pandemic that hit our city really exacerbated the structural deficit that we have already. I felt that we were embracing our goals to try and increase to the 3-month general fund reserve and address the issues in this biennium. But we do have this pandemic that's hitting us, affecting all our citizens, as well as some of the racial tension with George Floyd and many others that have just brought light to those other issues that all communities are experiencing. And I feel that as important as the budget is, it feels like we should push this down the road a little bit further, take some risks on what our budget will look like in 2022. As you were saying, we'll be revisiting the budget in 2021 to see how the forecasts and revenues, expenditures are coming along, and make some modifications, adjustments as necessary. So for 2021, I'm proposing that we use 300,000 of the field replacement that you had mentioned and apply that to our human services. And in 2021, we also begin the process of looking at doing a needs assessment with being mindful of a resource center with providing services to City of Bothell residents, as well as the community court. For the DEI position, I really felt that how it was laid out in our earlier presentation was as thought out as it could be at this point. We still need to develop the scope of what this DEI staff person would do. I believe it should be still maintained as a diversity, equity, and inclusion staff person. And it was a resolution that we made, and I do feel that we should start taking steps forwards towards developing what it looks like for the city of Bothell, because a DEI position will look different in each community, and we haven't exactly figured that out. And so I'm proposing that we put in the budget a half-time DEI staff person to begin that process, to memorialize our resolution to show that we're serious about this, and to identify what we need to do to include the community to move this forward, and to have it throughout our boards and commissions. And as part of the Human Services Grant, I feel it would be important for myself as mayor and the deputy mayor to be involved in that process. It's along with the development of the resource center and the community court as kind of a tandem venture, I would say. So yeah, those are my thoughts on what the presentation was. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a couple questions for the city manager. You mentioned asset replacement aside from vehicles, and having that being kind of put aside. What sort of vehicle budget do we have for replacement this year?
Oh, that was outlined specifically in materials that were brought to you earlier. I don't have that specific information in front of me.
Okay.
But we look at a variety of factors when we look at our vehicle replacement. So we look at the current condition that they're in, the number of miles. We also look at how often they need to be fixed. And as many of us know, when we have our own vehicles, we get to that tipping point where we're throwing good money after bad. And sometimes vehicles take far more in care and the work of the mechanics than it is worth to keep them. So that's what we did. Our fleet manager took a look at those vehicles, carefully assessed what we needed. Obviously, police vehicles are used much harder than, let's say, an inspection vehicle and a vehicle for inspector that is just sort of driven around the city versus a police vehicle. So we made the effort to, as we do every year, but even more so, checking to make sure that whatever vehicles we are recommending for replacement are absolutely necessary in 21-22. But I'm sorry, I don't have the exact information.
Okay. Another thing is, we have some new initiatives that council, we identified as priorities, some of which are near and dear to my heart. Red light cameras, Granicus, the long range planner. Do we know how many of those new initiatives there are, and what the total cost is on an annual basis for those?
So it's not a really easy question. So things like the long range planner are not a new initiative. Again, it's a budgeted position that is currently vacant. And so the question to council was, do you want to fill this position? And the answer was yes. And so it's not an increase. It's nothing new. It's the continuation of the existing level of service, which is 2 senior long range planners. There are 2 initiatives. One is the purchase of agenda software, which would increase community engagement, and that's a $22,000 annual fee. So that's how software packages work now. You just pay an annual fee for them. And then you also supported the transition of one position in IS and upgraded that position to be a security officer position at the cost of about $40,000 a year to make that transition. Those were 2 of the major ones. Things like red light cameras and school zone cameras generate revenue, and so they're cost neutral. And really the rest of your initiatives, which I will bring to you again when I bring the scorecard, really are existing levels of service that we continue to do and deliver to our community towards achieving your priorities and goal.
Okay.
Were there any others that you were thinking of that maybe I missed?
No, I don't have the list in front of me right now. I'm just trying to figure out how to get $350,000 of human services funding so we can fully fund that, because that's a bit of a red line for me.
Understood.
And if there's anything that we can put off in terms of new initiatives that help us to get closer than that, if we go without Granicus for a year and we put that in for 2022, and that helps us fully fund human services, we don't get everything we want. And I'm happy to put some of those new things off in order to make sure that we were able to fund human services. I had one other question about the long-range senior planner. In the planning industry, there really seems to be a growing recognition of the need for equity in planning. And the Planning Commission recommended something that was very similar, but a little bit different to what we had talked about during the summer. Can we look for, instead of simply hiring a long-range senior planner, specifically look for an equity planner? So somebody who's able to do that day-to-day planning work that we need, but also has specific expertise and training in DEI, and kind of kill two birds with one stone?
Yes, we actually, diversity is an important part of our recruitment process, and was something that we're very interested in capturing in this recruitment, and is a high priority. And so I am hopeful that that's something that we're going to be able to deliver on. We're working through the final steps of that recruitment, so I'm not able to share specifics, but it was a very specific area of focus for us.
Was it a specific area of focus in the job role that we put out? Did people know by reading the job description that we're looking for somebody with specific expertise in this area?
I'm not sure that it was specifically outlined. That's a great question. But I know as we looked at the candidate pool, those were part of the questions and part of the discussion, because that's something we want to bring to the organization. But I'm not sure that it was specifically highlighted. I know it wasn't entitled like long-range senior planner, DEI, but absolutely it was something that we're very interested in bringing to the city.
And I don't simply mean, and I want to make sure I'm clear, I don't simply mean hiring somebody who, I mean hiring somebody who has specific training in DEI that, whatever is available in terms of schooling, in terms of credentialing for that. I would love to go out for that position again and tweak it just a little bit so that we can have that position available, so people who are looking specifically for that position with that kind of expertise could see that and be interested. Is that something that's doable? I mean, is that something you need 4 people to give you direction on? Or is that something that we could just kind of put out and see what we find and what kind of applicants we get?
Well, we're in the very final stages of that recruitment and have some really qualified candidates. And council is very eager to move, your docket forward. If we did that again, we would delay the hiring of a long-range planner. It's certainly something I can discuss again with Director Catterman. I hear you, and I understand what you're asking for, and I had the same discussion with the mayor. The opportunity to look at a position like that as well. I'm not quite sure whether an offer's been made or not. So I'm not quite exactly sure where we are in the process, but I can talk to Director Catterman again.
We've been without that position for some time now. I would happily wait an extra few weeks to see if we can get somebody with the kind of expertise that, we really found we were lacking in the study that we did earlier this year.
Understand it, and it would be months, not weeks.
Okay.
But I understand.
I would do that too. So, and again, if you speak to Director Catterman and we have somebody that is wonderful, that has those credentials already that's applied, I'd rather not wait, but I'd be willing to wait to get that. That's it for my questions. I do have some other comments. And listening to public comment and chatting with people in the community, nobody is excited about this budget. No matter who you are or what your ideology is, there's plenty in here to not like, because this is tough. And we've heard a lot from the community about it. One of the things that I have the biggest issue with and has been my biggest concern is simply that we are, putting, 20-25% of our general fund reserves into operating expenses over the next biennium. That's tough. I one thing that really encourages me is this idea of kind of thinking of this as two budgets, one for the first year and then one for the second year. Quite simply because, like you mentioned, we're facing so much unknown that we don't really have any idea what our revenue projection, what our revenue is going to be. Like, we can project it, but like there are so many variables. There could be a vaccine next year and economic, activity could get back to normal. A new administration on the federal level could be more motivated to use their unique financial tools to help us and give us some aid. The other side of the coin is that it's realistic we won't hit our revenue projections. And if that's the case, next year's going to be tough. In looking at the kind of spread of that 3.6 million, with roughly, I think 1.1 million was the number you mentioned, being in the first year, and then the lion's share of that going into the next year, it gives us, or into 2022, it gives us time to adapt, time to move. It kind of hunts that down the road to see what happens when we have more information. I would really encourage us to act quickly if things seem like they're going bad, which we did this year, and I appreciated that. Those are some of my general thoughts on the budget. The Human Services Grant, the last few times we've brought this up, there hasn't been specific directions from four of us one way or another, and I'm really hopeful that tonight there will be. The idea of cutting the support that we offer to the people in our community who need the most help at the very moment there is the most need, it is just unconscionable to me. I can't see that. From the reporting data that we've seen, just from the largest 27 of the 45 organizations we support, almost 9,000 people in Bothell have been touched by these organizations over the last 2 years. And I don't expect that number to be smaller in the next 2 years. I think that the best course of action right now is simply to fund human services for 2021 at the exact level we did in 2020. And then over the next year, we can have the Human Services Committee take on a process and see if there's something we want to change in terms of how we decide that money is allocated. But I think it's important to have it in the budget to allocate it one way or the other. I don't think we need to overthink this. I don't think we need to start a new process for 2021. I think it's way too late in the game for these organizations to have an application process. And quite frankly, they're counting on this support and it's needed. Briefly, something I've heard from quite a few people is this idea that we need to know exactly how many people in Bothell are helped by these programs, and we need our money to go directly to Bothell. And I'm a bit uncomfortable with the rhetoric around that. We can't know, but neither can our neighbors necessarily be guaranteed that all of this is coming into Bothell. And over the balance, we support these organizations and we get support in return. Over the long term, it's going to average out. I'm not of the opinion that we have to be absolutely certain that all of these numbers go to Bothell, because for sure some of our dollars will go elsewhere, but other people's dollars will come to us too. And I don't see any reason why that would not work out in the wash. In terms of funding, I would like to reconsider funding those human services. I'd like to reconsider when we add some of those new initiatives like we just spoke about. I'd like to look at taking some of the money on things like red light cameras or Granicus. We expect red light cameras to be neutral, but we still have to spend money on them right now, and hope that comes back. So I would support taking some of those items out of the budget for now, and using that money to fund this human services grants, and then leftovers, if we don't have it fully funded, I think that's when we should support taking money from the ball field. It also, I don't know how to say this really eloquently, but it feels like every time that we have a budget crunch, Parks gets hit the hardest. And I get that, and I understand that. It's just really difficult for me for a department that's already lost by far the highest percentage of its employee count to just keep taking from there, especially when we look at our largest departments. and their budgets are actually increasing a little bit from the last biennium. Again, I'd like to see if there are any of those initiatives that we can put off for a year to help support human services grants. I have a list. I'm not going to go forever, I promise. Basically, there's 4 things that I would like to see. Is first, fund human services for 2021 at the exact level to the exact organizations that we did in 2020. I don't want staff to have to spend a lot of time on it. I think that we've done good work finding these organizations, and I think these organizations have shown us in their reports that they are serving Bothell well, and we're getting our money's worth. And over the course of the year, we can decide what we want to do next year. I mentioned reevaluating when we start some new initiatives. And I would also add to that for sure there's a risk when we don't replace vehicles that we will end up with a larger bill down the road. But I would rather take that risk this year, quite simply because cars are really expensive and we need the money desperately this year. I think we should look at that DEI specific long range planner that I mentioned earlier. And I also think that we should fund a full-time DEI person who can engage with the community, what we talked about during the summer. But I think we should fund it starting in 2022. Obviously, we're going to sit down and have hard conversations at the end of next year. And we don't know what our context is going to look like. We don't really know what our revenue situation is going to look like. Putting it in the budget for 2022 does a couple things. It gives us time to have a process to figure out exactly what we want that position to be. And we can do that over the course of the next year. It communicates to the community that we're serious about this. We've heard quite a bit from our community that they want this, and I want them to know that they're heard. It also gives us the chance to not do it if the worst case scenario hits. And I know everybody that has been calling in probably doesn't want to hear me say that, but if things go sideways, we are not completely committed, but we have done the work to know exactly what we want that to be, so that when we do have that discussion over when we want that to happen, we'll know exactly what we're talking about and we'll know exactly what we're getting. So those are the 4 things that I would like. I would love to hear everybody else's feelings on those, and I will stop talking now.
If I could make one technical point of clarification, the red light cameras and the school zone cameras are not in the budget because they are revenue neutral. So there is no expense to take out because they're not included, because they offset each other. So there is no savings by postponing those. There's no savings because they're not in the budget.
If if we could simply, like, at a meeting in December, have a list of those new things that we are bringing forward and how much they cost, I'd love. We can, the 4 of us can discuss those, or the 7 of us can discuss those, and see what we think we can put off or what we don't think we should.
Again, the only ones that I can recall are the $40,000 for the security officer and $22,000 for the engagement program are the new initiatives that are included in the budget.
Okay. What I want to say is, like, I guess we don't know for sure those are the only 2 things. Those are the only 2 things we can recall. I don't, it's not that I don't trust you. It's just like, I want to make sure we know in order to have that conversation.
Understood. And the direction for funding the position is to find the funds within the operating budget, which would be the direction to me. I didn't identify specific funding for the position. And again, just to clarify, the position is $120,000 a year, which is why it's referred to as $240,000, because this is a 2-year budget. So whatever council chooses to do, if it chooses to fund it at a part-time or a full-time position, the direction, as to me as the city manager who is responsible for the operations of the city, would be to find the funding to do that. And I would then do that at your direction.
But if we funded it full-time starting in 2022, then it would you would only have to find $120,000 over this biennium, correct?
We would do it. We would bring it back to you as part of the mid-biennium amendment, and we would show you where the revenue would be coming from if you wanted to fund it in 2022.
There's no way we can put it in the budget starting it in 2022?
Sure, and it would just show a deficit. It would just drop the general fund reserve deficit down by the 120,000. And
okay.
Councilmember Dewar.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, City Manager. I have a couple questions. So regarding the red light cameras, I assume that they cost money, at least initially to purchase. And I understand you're saying they're revenue neutral, but at some point we have to pay a bill to obtain them. So I still am interested in knowing what the cost is. And then I just was curious, have we estimated or seen any projections on the impact to the courts when people start fighting those red light camera tickets? And is that part of our calculus as far as revenue neutral?
Yeah, great question. So again, it's the way that the red light cameras and the school zone cameras are set up. It's a business model, so we don't purchase the equipment. It's part of it's the business model, right? We don't release the equipment, so there's no purchase price up front, and the revenue is generated. We pay the cost of the monthly lease, and then any additional revenue goes to the city. And yes, we've had the conversation with the court. What the courts have found is that if someone comes into not protest, but protest their ticket, they're shown the video, and then they say, oh, okay, who do I make the check out to? So across the region, that's the information that the court has received and has experience with. Is it's a relatively low impact to the courts.
Okay, great. That's good to know. And I wanted to comment on, the whole idea of the reporting being an issue. I mean, I've had conversations with some agencies where we don't give them a lot of money, maybe $1,000 or $2,000, because the Human Services Committee wanted to kind of spread the money across different types of services. And even just the idea that we cut checks more than once a year costs them time and money to where sometimes it's just not worth it to them. And so even though it's great to have reporting, especially when it's big ticket, I guess I would just mention that sometimes, it doesn't make sense to require a whole lot of data collection over the small amounts that we give. And we could certainly revisit that policy, but as a committee, we had decided, we want to fund a little bit towards language services, that English as a second language service. And, we funded, I think, Russian and Chinese, because those, and maybe Spanish, because those were the agencies that were available, and they kind of fit in a bucket that we thought was important to provide services to. So I guess I just would push back a little bit on requiring a whole lot of reporting depending on the amounts. And we could certainly come up with, amounts over which we would require a certain level of reporting. I'm concerned with the mayor. So I'm wondering if the mayor saying that the deputy mayor and he should be part of that process, if that means he's recommending to dismantle the Human Services Committee, or if he's talking about expanding it, because then it's a quorum of the council. So I'm curious what the point of that is. So I would like to learn more about that, and I wonder if the council has to vote on that or how that works. And then what else did I want to ask about? I guess in response to what Councilmember Mason Thompson said, I mean, I've been from the beginning very concerned about the human services grants. It's a pandemic and people are hurting. And I understand, that there are important things like ball fields. My kids use those ball fields. It's not that I don't care about them, but I think when you're in a crisis mode, you have to really prioritize where your money goes, and budgets are value documents, and my values cannot support cutting human services during a pandemic, or really, when do we ever not need human services? And so I would agree with Councilmember Thompson that we need to find a way to fund, at least through 2021, the full amount. I think those agencies are they're already well into their budgets. They've already, I expected to get a certain amount of funding, and have made their budgets based on that. And so I would be in favor of funding the full amount for 2021, and going through a process where we, maybe revisit the reporting and how we want to do that. I'd also be really interested in what one of the speakers said regarding maybe putting an RFP out again. In one of a conversation that I had with them, one of the agencies said that it really should have gone to different organizations for that kind of request. And so maybe if we were to do it again, more targeted to those that can and do provide that sort of service, we might have more luck, and then perhaps that could save on staff time. So I'd be interested if we're able to look into that. I think that might be a win-win, and help us a lot in terms of determining where the money goes, and fitting kind of our needs and where we want to put money. And I would also agree regarding the DEI position. I think I don't feel like we have a really good handle on exactly what we're looking for in terms of that position, and what the goals are, and the objectives. And I think taking some time in this next year to figure that out and go through that process, and then hire someone full-time in 2021 would be a great plan. Obviously dependent on what the revenue projections are, and whether or not we get a little help from the federal government in terms of filling in some gaps. Yeah, as I said, I would love to fund human services at the full amount for 2021, and revisit with an RFP or whatever that process. I'd like to know more about what the mayor meant when he said the deputy mayor and he should be involved in decisions, and what that means to the Human Services Committee. And I would like to fund DEI full-time in 2022, a budget allowing. And I do want to express appreciation for the very detailed budget conversation, and kind of really dialing down on what this specific situation is, and why we're in the position we are, and what our future prospects and needs are going to be in terms of future action. So thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I agree with the staff's recommendation to take asset replacement funds and support human services with the $600,000. I also think that we need to do something about a DEI initiative, position, but I also think that we ought to look to our neighbors and see if we can get some financial help from our neighbors, because I'm sure most of our neighbors are in the same position we are right now, trying to fund a position, and it's hard to fund and not know where we're going with this. But I like the budget the way it's been presented. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. Well, one, thank you, Jennifer and staff, for that report. Nice job walking us through it. I will confess that I may or may not have taken a lot of screenshots so that I don't have to go wind the tape back, but there was a lot of good data in there. And like you, I have some hesitations, some concerns about including speculative revenue in our forecast. It's it's almost like taking a deep dive off a tall cliff going, is this cliff as tall as I think it is, or is it taller? And that pause of taking the leap. I also appreciated council members Doer and Thompson, their idea of postponing the idea of a DEI for a year. However, I think Remy spoke to it, and I know our planning commission also spoke to it, of DEI going beyond staff and meeting in the community. And I bang the drum of neighborhoods and building strength of neighborhoods. I will confess to anyone who's listening who has given testimony about DEI, I personally have had a frustration. I understand your concerns and your heartbreak over things that are happening outside of Bothell's borders. And I kept waiting for an example of what have you seen in Bothell that has been a concern to you. Well, you may have given them earlier today and I missed it because computer malfunction. So that's on me. But I will say that, so I'm limited to my experience of what I see in Bothell. And when I think about neighborhoods, one neighborhood, and it's in a few spots in Bothell that I see get overlooked a lot and need a lot. And when I was on planning commission, we talked about at some point we're going to have to face the decline of these zones is mobile home parks. They're in a world of hurt on a lot of levels, and we don't hear from those folks. I mean, I heard from them when I was out doorbelling, but we don't hear from them. We drive by them, we see them walking in the street where they don't have sidewalks, but we don't hear from them. And so on one level, I would kind of like to have a part-time DEI who can look at how are we interfacing with the community around us. And I also suspect, because I've talked to a couple other cities, they don't need a full-time they've been in the trenches here for a while and they have a part-time DEI. We might find that a part-time DEI fits the size of our city perfectly. So if council wants to wait till 2022, great. If they would like to go half-time and get them more active in the community, great. Either way, we're talking about half the expenditures, right? 1 year spread out over half-time or 1 year full sum at the end. So I'll let that be part of the discussion. I will say, which is going to transition me into human services, when I had a discussion with some human services people and told them my heartache over not hearing from updates from people who are in mobile home parks, because I know they're living life day to day. I know they have issues and we don't hear from them. Our human services people said, oh, we do hear from them and we know their needs. So that said, transitioning into the human services conversation, I would like to see, I think the mayor made a comment about how we would support human services here for the first year. I would like to see us do that. And then Councilmember Doer said, figure out a study in our grant levels. And then let's see, is there another part? So I'd support that, but we do need to move into more accountability. So I'm only comfortable funding it as it is right now for the first year, and we need to get real proactive. I think whoever's involved in human services is going to roll up their sleeves and dive into it with a passion and work with it on the community and the city staff on that. I do hesitate to take it out of fields. I hate it that Parks keeps taking it in the chops, as Council Member Thompson said. So if we do take it out of fields, and I hate because we have like 4 big demands. Our city manager said that we need to fund our reserve. We need to fund our cleanup. We have lease payment, big deal. That lease payment is a huge, big deal. And we have asset replacement. We cannot have city staff running around pushing wheelbarrows because cars don't work. We need to have we need to have functioning wheelbarrows. So there's asset replacement is something that we need to focus in on. So if we do take out of fields to put a bandage on this first year, I really would implore that we would, when there's a sale, putting that buffer back into the fields. And that's my 2 bits on that.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. Just bear with me a second. I've got quite a few comments here, but first, I just want to thank the city manager and staff for preparing the presentation. These are always tough conversations to have, but having the conversation and being able to talk through it with the council, understanding how each of us is looking through it from a different lens, I think is important. And we've, in the past, I hear this thing where somebody, I think it was the former mayor, used to say, you mix up the sausage and you get the link. Well, it's easy just to go make a decision. It's tougher to listen to all the information, gather the information, and make an educated decision. And I think that's in essence what we're doing here is we're making an educated decision on several tough issues right now in front of us, DEI and human services, but more importantly on a budget in a very, very tough time. So I just wanted to first off just say thank you to the city manager and staff and everybody who's put so much time and effort into this. As far as the budget is concerned, there's a couple things that I picked up on keynotes from the presentation. One is do not make drastic changes without data. I think is a very important comment that I heard tonight. We cannot balance our budget through cuts. So cutting positions isn't the way to balance budgets. I don't know too many cities that make cuts to balance their budget, but I did hear that loud and clear. One of the things that concerns me is what happens if we don't put money away for reserves and something further drastic happens. So I heard that loud and clear. What happens if we don't fund our asset replacement? We talked a little bit about sports fields, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but we're not replacing our fire engines and aid units or whatever. Councilmember Agnew, you're gonna hurt me for not having the proper terminology, but the point of this is that we all have budgets personally, professionally, and we represent our community. So we have to take the replacement of these assets very critical, because if we don't and we have to replace something and it's not available to us, it could be a much bigger issue for us down the road. So, and then there's the possibility of shared services. The city managers brought this up several times. I think there's huge opportunity for us to look at that in the future and see, whether it be police and fire or, community court, anything that we can do. We see the power of shared services through the MPRSA. And what the MPRSA is doing with the several entities, King County, Snohomish County, Bothell, Woodinville, Kenmore, all working together on behalf of the senior center. So we see the power of what shared services can do. So love to hear more about that and how we can help, maybe get to a little bit better balanced budget with some of those shared services. 2022, the $550,000 at Councilmatic, $3.6 million, those numbers concern me. Concerns me the fact that when I was first elected to this council, our reserve was almost nothing. And we've worked as a council very hard to get it back up there. And that's no small feat. that took the entire city staff, everybody at City Hall, the city manager, council, everybody working collaboratively through these long meetings that the city manager alluded to get us to where we are today. And we're nowhere near where we need to be. We're going to continue to work hard on this to get us back to those reserves where we should be in order to be fiscally responsible, which in fact is one of our goals, is to be fiscally responsible and putting money away for the rainy day. So again, tough conversations around the budget. There's a lot of work to still do. I look forward to doing that with the council and the city manager and staff, and making sure that we meet our goal of being fiscally responsible and looking out for our community. I want to dive into human services first. It's important we understand the needs of our community. And every conversation I've had with this council as on the dais, all the conversations that I've had with community leaders across our community and regionally, I can't tell you I've ever met a council member, a county leader, a state leader who has not supported human services. It's just not something that you hear. It's not something that's even remotely talked about. It's always about, how do you find what the needs are? How do you make sure that you ensure that the funding that you're providing is getting to the person who's in need, and that you're being fiscally responsible with those funds? And I say that because some of the things that I've heard over the past 9 months, specifically during the COVID, the pandemic that we have, is the needs have changed throughout our community. And if you've gone into our community and you've talked to folks within our community, you know that the programs in which we've been funding have had a profound impact on our community. And I'll speak to one specifically. Actually, I'll first say hats off to Hope Link, because they have done an amazing job. But the one that I hear the most about is the senior center, and the sheer number of families on a weekly basis that center is helping. And the work that the community of Bothell did, and the surrounding Kenmore, Woodinville, and Snohomish County, King County did to pass the levy, the community spoke loud and clear about the need for that center. And the work that center continues to do on behalf of our community is amazing. And so I guess will speak for myself, am immensely proud to be able to say that we have such an asset within our community, serving our community and helping those within our community. And that goes to, what is the need of that center? And so when we talk about individual grants that are given out through the dollars that we're providing for human services, is there a bigger need for that one entity right now because of the pandemic we're having? And those are some of the questions that I'm struggling with to ensure that I'm looking at what the true need is across our community. At the same time, understanding what the need is regionally, serving on some of the regional committees that I serve on, and making sure that we're providing not only funding here at home, but funding across the region in the right spots so that the people are getting the help that they need. So when we talk about, $750,000, $600,000, $300,000, these are arbitrary numbers that we're just throwing out. And I will speak for myself. I'm not a professional. I do not know exactly how much somebody needs, the senior center specifically, to feed 700 families a week. Is it going to be 800 families a week or 1,000 families a week? These are the experts that we need to fully understand from them what the true need is before we just write a check and say, here's some money for you. And so I will just leave the human services piece by saying that I'm glad we're having the conversations. I know we're going to fund human services. What the dollar amount is, I can't speak to that at this point right now, but we need to fund human services. We need to ensure those funds get into the hands of the people that need it the most, especially during the pandemic, which I know we will do, and start to have positive conversations about how we can ensure that the dollars that we're giving out are getting into the hands of the people that need it the most. But I want to thank everybody for the conversations. The fields is a concern of mine. And you all know that fields are near and dear to me. But it's not just because I'm a coach, a father of, kids that go out and play. But it's because I get to see all the families that are out, all the kids that are out, all the adult leagues that are out using those fields. And I at no point want to say that serving a family that needs food for a holiday dinner is more important than a kid going out and being active on a field for an hour. Because who am I to judge the importance of what one thing means to one family versus another family? And so it's a tough decision that we make, and we struggle with it. And I would say that the way in which I look at it is, we are taking something from one group of people to help another group of people. And it is our due responsibility to ensure that we get back to helping all of our community. And that means if we're going to do this, we need to ensure that we find a way to fund the replacement of these fields so that the fields are not shut down, and all of the families, the hundreds of families that are actually Bothell residents, lose an asset in which their kids themselves can get out and be active. And when we talk about asset replacements, imagine if we took the Wayne Golf Course away. Imagine how hard our community fought to save that golf course. Imagine if that was not there. All the folks that go out there on a weekly basis, a daily basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis, especially right now during a pandemic, and use that park. Deputy Mayor Zornes, you alluded to taking funding away from the Parks Department, and I think I heard several others, Councilmember Thompson and Doer, speak to this. And everything about our parks is essential to the mental stability of everyone in our community right now and beyond. So it's critically important that we remember that when we're taking funding from something, to ensure we refund it, to ensure that we don't lose the asset, because they have a profound effect on other parts of our community that also need to ensure that they have the funding available to them. So I guess enough on human services. I'll go to DEI. I don't know what happened with the title of the DEI position, and equity and inclusion and all of that, but it reminds me of how much more we need to have around a conversation of what this position is actually going to be and do. And speaking to other leaders around the region, being part of panel discussions about equity, inclusion, race that I've had over the past year, is being part of SCA, speaking to 14 youth kids across the North Shore School District about race and equity, and having a panel discussion with them. The one thing that it says to me is that there's a lot to learn, and I've lived this my entire life. And so talking to other leaders like Kirkland and Renton, Kirkland I know is funding a DEI position. They're still studying what that position will do. Renton has a full-time position. I think for me, and I think that I hear the council saying we want to make this a priority. Our priority should be understanding what the position will be. And maybe that means hiring a part-time position for now and having them help us decide what the full-time position will be. Having other municipalities like Renton and Tukwila and Kent who have full-time positions, reaching out to them, seeing how and what services that DEI position is providing for them. I don't think that any person on this council, anybody in our city, is saying it's not important. I don't think that this is an inward position. I think this is both an inward and an outward position that we heard from the Planning Commission on the importance of it. The importance of it is it goes far beyond just people of color. It's an entire community. It has the DEI has to represent every single person in the community. We talk about people with disabilities. It has to represent them as well. So we need to understand. We need to study. We need to fulfill. In order to fulfill a position, you need to understand what that position is going to do. And I just want to close with, if it's $120,000, if it's $60,000, If it's a person that's going to come in and help full-time or part-time, whatever that's going to look like, I believe wholeheartedly that the city of Bothell deserves to have a DEI position. I know in my heart that we will have a DEI position. I can't speak for what the council is going to say about, full-time or part-time. I'm open to that discussion. But most importantly, I just want to close by saying that since the first time I heard the human service was not in our budget, and it was a proposal, we got our first proposal from the city manager. It was a proposal. And there's a process that we as a council go through, and it's to get a proposal, review the proposal, have a discussion, work through the discussion, and mix that sausage and come out with a link at the end. It might not be the best decision, but at least it's a decision where we've gone through the process, asked the tough questions, and got the answers in front of our community so they can hear the hard work that we're doing on behalf of them. And I believe that is what we were elected to do. And I honestly believe that is what we are doing here tonight and have been doing. And I hope and pray, my prayer is that our community will see that this at no point was we were not going to fund human services. At no point we were not going to hire a DEI, and that we were just having a conversation so that we could get to the decision of what we were going to do, and that be the best decision that we could make at the time that we are in right now with the budget that we have on behalf of our community. Thank you.
Councilmember McAuliffe. Oh. All right, we're having some technical difficulties, so we will just we'll hold off on Councilmember McAuliffe's turn. So far, it definitely sounds like we are all coming to agreement over the inclusion of these items, the human services grants, the DEI position. It sounds like the discussion will turn to how much, when. I just want to say, as far as the Human Services Grant Committee, I was thinking of being more involved. As the mayor, I, personally feel responsible for this. I haven't had enough exposure to this. I feel just that I have the extra ability to move things along. So that's where I was coming from getting involved. Perhaps it isn't both the deputy mayor and myself, but I just felt it was imperative that I support this and get involved and become more knowledgeable. I believe, being part of the committees or being on a board gives you that extra knowledge. You're spending more time on these items. So that was my thought on that. And it looks like we have Councilmember McAuliffe here now. So I'll ask her to speak her mind.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor? Yes. Thank you. So I really appreciate everything I've heard so far tonight on the comments. I think it's been a pretty devastating day to see the closures that have come again to our small businesses and restaurants and to our people who are employed by them within our community. So another 4 weeks of closing down is really devastating to our people. I don't think we've seen anything like this in my lifetime or in yours, where we see so many people that will be struggling to survive, whether it's their business or their employment or for their families. So this is a very important time for Bothell to focus on the people in our community and the people that we care about, and try to do something together. One of the people that talked to me last week was a small businessman, and he said, "Thank you so much for the money that you gave us from the CARES Act, because that saved my business and I can still be open and I can still operate." So this is such a hard time for our people. But I also recognize that our parks are also very important, because mentally and physically, our families, children, and community needs to be able to use our parks. And if we take all of the dollars that we've said we would invest in them, $600,000, we will be closing parks down next year or very shortly after. So I'm going to agree with the mayor. I would like to see, for human services, take half of that money, so $300,000, and put that into human services. So we're kind of cutting the baby in half. Give $300,000 to the parks and see what they can do to maintain what we've got. I also support the community's concerns for a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator. But I will agree also that we need to move slowly and decide what we can learn from other cities. Can we share some resources? If we start with a 0.5 person, as the mayor suggested, I believe we could assess the community needs and move forward with that person to kind of bring to the council how they will support our community and what that need looks like. I think the only other thing I want to really talk about is the support that we've gotten for our people from HopeLink, the Senior Center, North Shore School Foundation, the Rotary, and the city itself. We are a community of great need right now, as many communities are, but we have people here who care about each and every one of us, and they will step up. When we do the human service grants, I want to see us really define who we're going to fund and what the great need is in our community, and make sure that we just don't send it out to a lot of people, but we send it out to those that can give the greatest impact to our families. So with that, I think that clarifies where I'm at. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So everyone has had a chance to speak now. And so as I was always saying, I think we've come down to agreement on the items that we would like to see in the budget. It's coming down to the numbers, the timing, and just how it fits into our budget. Does anyone have any thoughts after they've heard the body of the council speak? Councilmember Thompson?
I heard a quorum for fully funding human services for the upcoming year for 2021, and a half-time DEI person. Did anybody else hear that? So how do we make that happen? Do we make a motion?
We make
to add that to the budget?
I'd say one direction was also desired to have where it's coming from. I'd say whether we're taking from the general fund reserve or we're taking it from the asset replacement that the city manager had identified as a potential short-term piece of that. I think that's the missing piece, but I'd agree with the funding of the human services grants for 2021 and the halftime DEI for 2021 as well. Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you. So can we real quickly clarify, are we saying we're going to fund the exact same groups for 2021 as we did for 2020? And confirm if it's the full amount for the 1 year of a 2-year biennium, what that dollar amount would be?
So yeah, that's definitely part of the discussion. It sounds like there was the desire or the possibility of sticking with the service providers that we have currently, as we're very late in the process. COVID short-circuited our process of the human services grant. We were looking to do a needs assessment. It didn't happen. I think we have to make that a priority for us in 2021 to look at that. So I would say it would be to the same service providers for half of the 19 and 20 biennium. Councilmember Dewar.
I can provide a little more information about that. When the RFP wasn't responded to and we had extra money, we did put additional weight and fulfilled all of the Bothell located human services agencies. We fulfilled all of their grant requests to the maximum amount. So it's heavily weighted toward human service agencies in Bothell. That's not to say that it's weighted towards those that provide the most service to Bothell residents, although one could make the argument the senior center is by far probably the largest contributor to Bothell residents, and we fund that by far the most. So if that provides any additional assurance to those that aren't on the committee, I thought I'd just mention that.
Appreciate that. So yeah, so are there still questions on Councilmember McNeil?
Yeah, so I'd actually like to make a motion if it's okay.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments they want to make before the motion? You have the floor.
Councilmember, I'm sorry.
Councilmember McAuliffe. You're on mute. There you go. Nope. Still. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just am concerned, and I'm going to hear your motion, but I've just really encourage us to think about not taking all of the money from parks, but being sure that we at least take $300,000 and put that into parks, who has already been devastated. And I just would encourage that in the motion.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we fund the human services for 2021 at the 1 year rate equal to 2020, and a part-time DEI position for 2021. The funds to, as proposed, to come from the budget per the city manager's presentation.
Deputy Mayor Zorns, I saw your.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that item? Councilmember Thompson.
In the motion, I just heard funding the part-time DEI position for 2021. I just want to make sure we get that in there for both years for the entire biennium rather than just have a 1 year DEI position. I'm assuming Councilmember McNeil misspoke there, but I just want to be clear. Did you mean to do that, Councilmember McNeil?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please do.
Yes, Councilmember Thompson, you can amend my motion. My motion was for the 2021 budget as a part-time. And the reason I made the motion for 2021 is because I'm hoping at the end of 2021, we'll have additional information to be able to go into 2022.
In that case, I'd like to amend the motion to add it to the budget for both years of the biennium.
Councilmember,
Obviously, yes.
As a point of order, there's a motion on the table that has not yet been seconded. If it is seconded, then we would entertain a motion to amend.
I believe Deputy Mayor Zorns had the second.
Yeah, I heard Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yeah, we were in discussion at that point.
My apologies. Okay,
yep.
Then an amending motion would be in order at this time.
Given that, we're going to be reconsidering the budget, in the middle of the biennium anyway, I would just like to amend the motion to include it for both years of the biennium.
Councilmember Dewar?
Second.
All right, any discussion on, all right, so we have amending motion by Councilmember Thompson with the second by Councilmember Dewar to increase the DEI position funding at part-time for 2021 and 2022. Any discussion on this item? Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you. I will not be supporting the amending motion just because it's a part-time basis for 2022. I'm hoping by 2022 we can potentially have a full-time position.
All right, any further discussion? All right, Director Bothell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to clarify that what we're talking about is funding $300,000 out of the general fund for the funding will actually come from the replacement fund to the general fund and then fund the Human Services Grant Program for 2021. And then we also have a 0.5 FTE being added to the authorized position schedule for 21 and 22. And we have $120,000 being authorized as expenditure in the general fund budget for that position. Did I get that all right?
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
That's my understanding of the amended motion.
All right, seeing no further discussion, City Clerk.
Please say yay or nay when I call your name regarding the amending motion. Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yay.
I'm sorry, can you say yay or nay? I can't, my hearing's bad.
Yay.
Nay. Thank you.
No. With yay.
Councilmember Thompson?
City Clerk.
So that was a yes. Say yes or no. How about that? Yes? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Thompson?
Yes, and I would also love to see this be a full-time position in 2022 as well, but yes, for at least a part-time position.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
No.
Councilmember McNeil?
Nay.
Mayor Olson?
Yes.
Councilmember Dorr?
Yes.
Councilmember Agnew?
Nay.
Passes 4-3 with Councilmembers McAuliffe, McNeil, and Agnew in the negative.
All right, thank you. So that's the so that approves that motion. So the amended motion. So I believe that's the end of this public hearing for the.
Well, no. Sorry.
Wait.
That was the amended. So I'm sorry. The underlying motion was to approve the budget with certain additions from Council Member McNeil. That was seconded by Deputy Mayor Zorns. Then there was an amending motion. The amending motion passed. So now that has replaced the underlying motion. And the underlying motion now, and someone jump in and correct me if I've gotten this incorrect, is that we would we would approve the budget per the city manager's presentation with the addition of the human services grant for 2021 at the same level that was funded for 2020. We would approve the human services funding for 2021 at the same level as 2020. And then we would approve a 0.5 full-time position for the diversity, equity, and inclusion position for both 2021 and 2022, with 120,000 authorized from the general fund is the current motion before us.
Yes.
Is there any discussion on that matter?
Yes. All right. Councilmember McNeil.
Yes, I will be supporting the motion, and I just want and hope, pray that the council will remember at the end, as we go through the budget discussions, to have a full-blown discussion around a full-time position as a DEI, even though we have it funded, we're funding it at a part-time position.
Councilmember Thompson.
I'm going to speak during the appropriate time now. I completely agree with Councilmember McNeil and support you there, and I'm looking forward to having that discussion also.
I too will support this, and likewise, I think this, gets us what we all are desiring for 2021, and gets us, shows us the support for ongoing in 2022, and we'll look forward to the information that we gain in 2021 to make a more informed decision for 2022. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, City Clerk.
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Mayor Olson?
Yes.
Councilmember Dorr?
Yes.
And Councilmember Agnew?
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 7-0.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That was great discussion in that whole matter. Appreciate everyone being so thoughtful with such hard decisions that we have to make for our community. So let's take a 10-minute break, come back at 9:17, and we will discuss our AB 20-154. Thank you, everyone. are on to AB 20-154. Ordinance enacting a temporary cap on delivery fees and other service charges imposed upon retail food establishments by third-party delivery services. I believe there she is, Economic Development Manager Jeannie Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. It's a pleasure to see you all. You've done some amazing work this evening, and I thank you for it. As an employee of the city, I really appreciate it. So I'm going to do you all a favor, and I'm going to keep my comments to 3 minutes and leave you plenty of time to ask questions. So I am here to ask Council to pass an ordinance that imposes a 15%, a temporary 15% cap on third-party restaurant delivery fees. All of our businesses have been impacted by COVID-19, but it is our restaurant and drinking establishments that have been hardest hit. In the Puget Sound region, restaurant revenue is down by 42%. The downturn in revenue is due in large part to closing indoor dining this past March through June. And once we went into phase 2 of the reopening plan, there were limited indoor dining options, plus the added cost of implementing COVID safety measures. In order to mitigate the loss of revenue due to limited dining, restaurants are using third-party restaurant delivery services for takeout dining. While these services are essential to some restaurants remaining open, they are also an added expense. For every $5 in sales made through a third-party delivery company, restaurants must pay approximately $1 in service fees. Under normal circumstances, these fees are simply the cost of doing business. But during COVID, these fees are taking a huge bite out of already slim profit margins and are disproportionately impacting Bothell's small and independently owned restaurants. And a lot of these restaurants are minority or women owned. For example, 31% of the CARES grants distributed this past summer or fall went to restaurants. And of those grants, 60% of those grants went to restaurants that were owned by minorities and women. As your economic development manager, my job is to advocate for all businesses. And I don't take it lightly asking you to put limits on any industry, but I must point out that third-party delivery services are profiting from this pandemic. Every time a restaurant is shuttered, their business goes up. I truly appreciate the Bothell Kenmore Chamber of Commerce stepping in this evening to speak on behalf of the members. I do know that more restaurants would have been here at the council meeting this evening to tell you how this is impacting them, but they're all busy working on what's going to happen next with the closures coming at midnight tonight. I do want to acknowledge and thank the DoorDash for speaking. I spoke yesterday to industry reps from Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats, and one other I can't remember, plus the Tech Association, the association that represents them. And I appreciate them commenting this evening. They also sent in a written comments that matched pretty much their comments this evening at council. What I would like to recommend this evening is that council pass this ordinance as is in light of the indoor dining shuttering again this evening at midnight. So pass the ordinance as is, and then giving the city attorney time to review the changes that they want to make to the ordinances, to this ordinance. If they are relevant, then we can bring back this ordinance to you for an amendment. So with that said, I'm ready for any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jeannie. I just wanted to say there's quite a few other cities have done this. And it seems like almost all of the restaurant associations are in support of this. When you've been looking into this, have you seen any negative impacts at all to the restaurants, or has it all been positive?
I have not seen any negative impact, and as part of my due diligence, I spoke with the Mayor Durkin's legislative policy person who put together the ordinance for Seattle, and specifically asked him if there were any unintended consequences, and he said no.
I mean, this is just, I mean,
Slam dunk.
keeping more money in our community and for our restaurants. And I think everybody that we heard comment from that owns a restaurant in the city was completely in support of this. I pretty much think it's a no-brainer.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Yeah, Jeannie, thank you. I really appreciate it. I called several restaurants to ask them some questions. And for those who rely on these delivery services and don't provide them themselves, they said that these delivery charges are eating into such thin margins that they already have, that it's just been a horrific way to try to survive. I did also ask them if they heard from customers that that confusion of the high rate of delivery being reflected in the food. And they said, thankfully, you know, that they did not have to deal with that. So I'm glad that that hasn't happened to our Bothell people. And I'm fine with the June 30th expiration date and revisiting it if we need to. So very well written, super well researched, and very much appreciated. Thank you.
Councilmember Dewar.
Can't hear you.
Mute.
I was going to move the recommended action, but Councilmember Agnew may have a question.
Councilmember Agnew. Is that a question or a second?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I agree with Mason. It's a no-brainer. I mean, this should be a slam dunk. Go ahead, Councilmember Dewar.
I move the recommended action.
All right. Councilmember Agnew.
I'll second that.
All right. So we have a motion by Councilmember Dewar to approve the attached proposed ordinance to impose a 15% temporary cap on delivery fees and other service charges imposed upon retail food establishments by third-party delivery services, and prohibiting such food delivery services from reducing compensation to paid drivers during the effective date of the ordinance. And the second is by Councilmember Agnew. Any discussion on this? All right, seeing none. City Clerk?
Please say yes or no when I call your name. Deputy Mayor Zorns?
Yes.
Councilmember Thompson?
Yes.
Councilmember McAuliffe?
Yes.
Councilmember McNeil?
Yes.
Mayor Olson?
Yes.
Councilmember Dewar?
Yes.
And Councilmember Agnew?
Yay.
Passes 7-0.
Rebel. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. All right. So that takes us through our agenda. We have our council conversations. Deputy Mayor Zorns.
Hopefully I can make this really quick. I missed the first part, so you had the committee updates, right? So I'm going to insert this, and then I'm going to have a little conversation piece, and then I'm going to yield the floor. So just about LTAC, I don't know, did Brittany tell you about the holiday windows? Nope. Okay, super exciting. Tell your friends and family. At Graham's Tea House, they have started, I got a little preview video of it, gingerbread houses, and she's got like 7 or 8 of them fully decked out, totally charming. And they're going to be doing a window decoration contest that will run through, I think, December 1st. And businesses along Main Street are going to have a competition for decorating their windows and making them very festive, which will be so much fun. So as you go outdoor dining, you can go look at the windows. So anyway, and you'll notice the finishing work of the lights going up Main Street next week. So that's that. The last part is, I've been thinking about each one of you today, because we're coming up on Thanksgiving and what I'm thankful for each one of you. And I thought, do I tell them individually how much I appreciate them? I see smiling faces, rubbing your chin, and all of you have blessed me so much through the year. And I just want to say I am grateful for you. I thank you. You think outside the box in ways that I don't think outside the box. You think outside the box in ways that no one else does. And about the time that I think something has been said that's insightful, each one of you has taken a turn stepping up to the plate with an observation that I just value so much. So at Thanksgiving time, you're gonna be among the blessings that I am thankful for. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Councilmember McAuliffe.
Thank you. And I will be brief as well, because I know the hour is late and we've had lots of discussions, but I do agree with Deputy Mayor Zorns that this is a time to be thankful. So let me thank the Bothell Police Department for their food drive last Sunday, because many people came by and delivered food, and now that will go to Hope Link. And so many families will benefit from that. So I want to thank the police department for standing there all day and being so friendly and nice when the food was delivered. I also want to recognize and thank our city manager, Jennifer Phillips, and her team. The budget was a very difficult issue. And there was many parts of it that I think you lost a lot of sleep over, as all of you did. And I just want you to know, as many times as you had to tell me it over and over and over, so I would finally get it and remember it. I do appreciate all of your work. So thank you. And one other one that I really want to bring to our attention is that the Rotary Club will be doing their Santa breakfast, and they'll be doing a drive-by so that families will get a breakfast and a gift for Christmas. And North Shore School District Foundation on their webpage is asking for donations to for people to support this. And it's going to serve about 750 families. So anybody that can help to support it. And I want to thank the Rotary and North Shore School Foundation for helping our families.
Councilmember Dewar.
I just want to thank Deputy Mayor Zorns for just showing once again you're just about the nicest person on earth. And I just want to reiterate what she said. I'm grateful that we've made it through this year, almost. And I second what Councilmember McAuliffe had to say about the budget and how very difficult it's been. And we made it. And I want to thank everyone for their hard work, staff and council members.
Councilmember Thompson.
I was just going to add on to that and say, it's been a heck of a year. Let's not do it again.
Councilmember McNeil.
Thank you, Mayor. I would not be able to get through the night if I didn't say thank you to all of you for all your hard work and dedication to the community. It's often overlooked that this is not really a paid position. It's a volunteer position, and we do it because of the passion and love that we have for our community. But I am going to challenge each and every one of you. I'm challenging myself this year to go out and give back during the holiday season. And, hearing the conversations that we've had tonight, let's see what we can do to help others this holiday season to get through some of the loss that they have and some of the economic loss. My wife, obviously in the hair industry, was her times have been cut back. So there's a lot of people that are suffering right now. And so I'm challenging all of you to go out and let's give back to our community and volunteer a little bit more of our time to ensure that we create some special moments for others. So thank you.
Councilmember Agnew.
I too would like to thank all of you for the year. I'd like to thank the Bothell citizens. I'd like to thank the city manager for the budget, which was interesting to say the least. And I want to remind all the citizens of Bothell to keep their masks on, keep social distancing. I know we have a vaccine coming, but it's not going to be here tomorrow. So the way the numbers are right now, we got to hunker down and stay the course. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm very thankful for all of you. Jean really said it very well. Davina's right. She is so sweet. Too bad the crows can't see the same thing that we see in her. City staff, Jennifer, they did a great job. Such a big lift and such a hard time working remotely, having to do, I can't imagine how many virtual meetings your staff had to do to pull this together. I mean, I know how challenging our meetings are, technical difficulties, just not being in the same room. It's just not the same, but we all made it through here. In the end, we showed how much we love Bothell, how big of hearts we have. You know, James really said this, you know, we do this out of the passion of making our community a better place, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you. You made my first year so far as mayor bearable. It's been 2020 has thrown everything it has at us, and I couldn't have done it without each and every one of you, each and every one of the city staff. And so just thank you again. You guys are great. All right, it's pretty quiet. Councilmember Dewar.
I'll try to be more professional. I motion that we close the meeting.
All right, Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Zorns.
I'm not sure we need a second, but definitely second.
We don't. We don't, but we're acting formal right now, and so thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great holiday. You know, as Tom said, you know, stay safe. Remember your mask, social distancing, wash your hands. I have a friend at work. He lives in Utah, so it's pretty funny that he came up this way. But he says, you know, put the wash back in Washington. So remember. So, but it'll make you think now. So, all right.
Well, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I want comedian mayor more often. This is great.
Good night, everybody.